Are GoPros set up where you can stream straight off of it?
It comes with an app that allows you to set it up for to be a webcam.
Hmm.
So I'm just not sure but hey, it's not.
Yeah, so for this camera that I use here, this is actually I think it's a Panasonic. It's a
Okay.
4K camcorder, digital camcorder. And I was like, oh, I could plug that in and make it into a webcam. And I found out later that you have to have this other thing I have called the Elgato 4K Cam Link. And
Okay, yeah.
what it does is it encodes the video as it's coming through so that it can be. I thought you could just plug a digital camcorder into the laptop. You can't do that. It has to be encoded. So that's what this CamLink 4K thing does. But if that has an app, I've never messed with GoPros. I was gonna get a GoPro for the podcast, but I thought at the time, like 2 years ago, I think they still had like kind of a fisheye effect on them or something like that. There was a reason why I didn't do it. I just think it was something with the image quality, and I knew this would work because I actually looked at Joe Rogan's list of stuff that he used for his podcast when he was still in California, and I almost, I started just buying shit off that because I'm like, well, why reinvent the wheel,
Yeah.
Yeah. So your camera's off right now.
Shit. All right, once we get this thing up and running again, I'm gonna stop touching it. It's like, hey, don't let the fucking officer touch anything comm related.
Now you're good.
All right, cool.
Back on the laptop. No, you're good.
Yeah, sir, back away from the laptop.
Now you're back on the laptop camera. Yeah, it's
okay, yeah, it's fine. Fuck it.
How has it been like creating and like doing your podcast? For the explain to people that maybe don't have never done one, the production, it's kind of a lot of work behind the scenes.
Yeah, actually a buddy of mine got in contact with one of his army buddies that's a retired psyop guy, and he was kind of asking us about, because he's oddly enough thinking about the same kind of thing, starting a podcast about psychological operations. And so I told him, it was kind of a steep curve. Me and Aaron are both somewhat technical guys from just doing different stuff in SOF. SOF has got some pretty highly technical gizmos nowadays.
Yeah.
But I mean, we started off with those little stupid webcams. We started off with those. Actually, we started off using our phones.
Mm-hmm.
And so we set our phones up on tripods, and then it was this big thing where we had to get the video off our phones onto the computer, and because the iPhone camera is good, as long as you use the one, the front towards enemy side, not
the selfie camera.
Yeah, you can't be using the selfie camera because that's a lower resolution, know. But basically what we've come down to is what we use nowadays is for ours is we run the GoPro, and he catches the audio on a little mixer that's floating around here somewhere, and then he pops that. So basically, we have a primary and an alternate as far as audio goes. Like if for some reason the mic shit the bed, we have the GoPro audio, and it'll sound tinny like the first 5 minutes or so of the last episode.
Yeah,
we hadn't started recording, so it just sounds kind of tinny. And so he collects the two microphone audio that you see in the video onto a memory card, runs that into Audacity. Audacity turns it in from a stereo into like a single wave file. And then inside Final Cut Pro, I sync up the GoPro footage and the mic footage, and just sort of like try to lock it together, because I have done it manually, and you can kind of see in the later stages of some of our videos, like our mouths aren't quite synced up because there's some sort of drift in Final Cut. But whatever, sooner or later we'll get in one place, and we're not working 10 hours a day at the other job, and get it dialed in,
so the audio sync happens on mine also. I use this program called Call Recorder that records. That's why I use Skype, because it records Skype phone calls, but it will record your side and my side as separate audio and video files, so I can go through and edit each one separately. And when I edit all my stuff in Premiere, and I'll get that drift too sometimes, only on my side, not necessarily on my guest side. It always seems to be on my side, so I have to go in and like move it like a 1/4 of a second, to the left
Yeah,
or right, just to get it.
Yeah.
And what I was saying before, where I was saying there's a lot of behind the scenes work, I don't want that to discourage people that want to start a podcast, but that is, if you want it to be like a higher production value and like, and it's all about how serious you want to take making a podcast. It can be a lot of work.
Right.
It doesn't have to be. You can record it on your phone and just record audio. Some people use podcasting is a very broad term because there's podcasts like this where we're just bullshitting and talking. There's podcasts like those murder mystery ones where it's all like phone call recorded and there's, investigations and conversations and all this background info.
Yep.
And then there's people that use it as kind of like blogging where they're just kind of, here's my, like online diary. Basically, they're just telling the world. So if you're just doing the online diary thing, you don't need to have a whole setup and stuff necessarily. But yeah, it's a fun little thing to get into. And then like, if it's something, for me, obviously I gained a little traction. I was like, hey, this could be something, this could be something. That's when I was like, all right, anything I get, I need to like up the quality. So it was always like, what's next? I'm going to go video, but when I go video, I'm going to do it legit. So I'm going to get a good camera and I'm going to get lighting, like just do it right off the bat instead of, as much as I can at least. Cause obviously there's always improvements that can be made. But yeah, man.
Well, I figure, it's kind of our whole thing with, we could, just for my personal self, like I could bitch about Hollywood all I want, about their politics, about the things that I allege that they get up to in their free time, Well, what am I offering as something else? Like I've got buddies that watch this on Friday night with their wife, as their hour of entertainment, and so I really want to put out a good product for people, So me and Aaron are really like, if somebody's gonna waste the time to listen to me run my mouth for 90 minutes, like I want it to be an engaging experience, and I want to be able to show them pictures like, hey, this is this crazy place called Frogner Park where, there's naked statues of people everywhere. It's a weird. Check it out. Like Ripley's Believe It or Not, but with weird soft guys. Like,
yeah. Speaking of naked statues in a park, I recently, like within the last 6 months, realized, and I go to Balboa Park. I go to Balboa Park all the time here in San Diego because I love that place. I'm right down the road. And for those that do go there or may go there in the future, if you're in the what do they call it, the Prado or whatever, the big main. There's like a big walkway with like statues and the big fountain and all that stuff. I never noticed until like 6 months ago that if you look up, the edge of the walls, the ceilings, or the roofs of all the buildings are held up by naked women that are all bent over. I was like, what the fuck? Like I was just shooting photos and I kind of look up and I'm like, wait, what? How have I never seen that before? And I looked it up, and they said they did it as a joke. Like the people that made Balboa Park in like 1915 or whatever did it as like a joke, and that it wasn't even like anything. They weren't trying to convey any kind of message, but it's literally just a line of naked women with their tits hanging out, lining the Prado area. It's pretty funny.
Well, I mean, that's basically before we deep dive into the military stuff. I mean, that's the type of stuff that hooks me into the strange esoteric stuff. I went to 1st Battalion to brief some dudes, and actually a guy was retiring from the Bravo company that I served in. And so we went there for his retirement and just to link up with some guys. And the wife and I love Balboa Park, and there's weird esoteric shit going on there too. Like at the very end of it, there's like the sun court or whatever. So it's right there. It's kind of tucked away and it's kind of hidden, but it's across from where they got the dinosaur skeletons and shit. And it's so if you're facing the big church and the long driveways behind you, it's off down to the right. And if you read the history of it, it's like, hey, like a cult of sun worshipers came here and was dancing around naked during this whole time. And you're like, okay, cool. And then the other trippy thing was down there next to the San Diego Museum of Man, and I actually did an episode of it on our show when Aaron was in Iraq and I was here and we were doing solo episodes. The San Diego Museum of Man, which they call the Museum of Us now, has an exhibit called "Could You Be a Cannibal?" Where they talk about all the fun ways that you could find out, whether or not you have what it takes to be a cannibal. And I'm like, well, this is kind of odd.
Yeah.
this is being a dude that's hip to like information operations, their presentation of it was a little on the nose. Like, well, hey, when you run out of cicadas, when your fucking food stops showing up, maybe your neighbor. I don't know, man.
I haven't.
I
I've actually never been to that museum. But my
yeah,
kid told me about that display though, because he went there with his school.
yeah,
I've been meaning to go, but the pandemic has had it open and closed because I have the Balboa Park
yeah.
pass where I can go to all the museums, and I just haven't been to that one. I've wanted to go see that display, what you're talking about. The other spot that you're talking about where the nudist thing was, that is now the Butterfly Garden, and it's right by one of the
Okay.
fountains, and it's right next to the photography. I want to say it's next to the photographic museum in Balboa
It's
Park. And
yeah,
honestly, if people that are listening that are in the area, if you want a great family photo shoot, that's a perfect spot. It's shaded. There's really
yeah,
cool trees. There's a tree that's like these weird roots growing down, and there's like a stone wall, and the roots grow over the wall and down. It looks like a little waterfall and stuff of roots.
yeah,
It's a super cool spot.
yeah. I took a picture of that. You know what? I might drop it on the Instagram because I'm like, hey, man, how long did that take? But anyway,
Yeah, for sure, dude. So that whole
yeah,
it's cool. I actually learned when I was going to SDSU, I was learning about why Balboa Park was built, the expedition, or exposition, excuse me, because of the Panama Canal, and they brought in like this whole like huge display. There's a spot that me and my kid like to go hang out and walk around, or we did before it kind of became a homeless encampment, um, where it was a huge display of Native Americans, where they brought in this like basically like a whole tribe and had them live there for a few months. They paid them and stuff, and they would just go about their lives like they were out on the wherever. And
yeah.
I don't know. It was crazy. It was a whole thing to get people to move to Southern California and to move to San Diego. It's really interesting actually. So yeah, man. It's San Diego's got a lot of crazy stuff. I try to get out, and
Yeah.
I'm probably like you where I see something weird or kind of old, or you can tell there's some symbology behind something on a building, and I'm like, what is that? There's something
Yeah.
to that. I kind of want to know what it is. Like, is this, because there's weird shit out there. There's secret societies, which it sounds nefarious, but there's just like groups of people that have like a secret club, and I think that's cool. I'd join it. If anybody needs me in their secret club, hit me up. I'll I might be down. I don't know. Let's see what's up. But yeah, I don't know. That's cool though. I think a good podcast. It just proves there's an audience for anything, man.
Yeah.
You're on the internet. You're putting it out to the world. 7 billion people. There's going to be an audience for no matter whatever you want to talk about. It's just how much time and stuff you want to put into it. And like you said, when you get more time, the consistency is real key. I've been trying to, since this is kind of my full-time gig now, I've been trying to make it
Cool.
consistent. Like every Tuesday, 8 a.m. That's when everything releases now. Audio and video, 8 a.m. Pacific. So for people that are listening, you can plan for that. Anyways, on to the military stuff. That was a good little
Let's do it.
intro
Yeah.
for people that are interested
Welcome
in
back.
podcasts and symbology and stuff. So we left off last time. You were talking about being in EOD school, or getting through all that, and then we stopped right before your first deployment as a member of the EOD kind of family, I guess, or whatever you want to call it. I don't know if there anything that you left out that you remembered after that you want to cover from the last one, or before we move on.
No, I think we pretty much hit the high water mark. I thought of some little stuff, but the sections of EOD school are called divisions: ground division, air division. Like I think it was calling it phases. I was like, man, somebody's gonna bust my balls about that. Not particularly. I mean, there's a bunch of like little nonsense, but I think we covered all the high water mark stuff. So when I graduated EOD school, I got orders to third. They were called platoons at the time because they weren't companies, but I got orders to third platoon EOD, which was in Okinawa, and it was an unaccompanied tour. So for the folks that aren't quite tracking what that means, is they send you to Okinawa by yourself and you leave your family at home, right? Which those are normally only a year long, but I think recently they started bumping them up to 2 years, or they had bumped them up to 2 years.
So crazy.
And to me that's like a divorce on a platter, right? Like But so I went there and checked into 3rd Platoon EOD, and at the time it was like a ghost town. Like everybody was off doing things like Cobra Gold and like some artillery exercise in Korea. So when I checked in, like literally there was one master sergeant there, and it was a couple of dudes that I went to EOD school with, you know. So there's like 3 sergeants, me and 2 other guys, Ed and Sam, and like this master sergeant. So it was kind of weird because I got there, got checked in. Well, first I went through all the JRC thing, which is interesting, right? Because if anybody hasn't been through or gone to Okinawa, when you get there, you go through this thing called JRC, which is like the Joint Reception Center. So I showed up as a sergeant. I was already a combat veteran. You know, I thought I was an adult at that time. And apparently I was wrong, because you go into JRC and it's basically like a week lockdown as they explain to you like how the Okinawan culture works. And you're like, hey, you know, don't be the pale face asshole while you're here. You know, this is the culture. You know, you guys already have a bad reputation here, so you know, try to fix it, kind of thing. But you know, you're stuck there with everybody, like PFCs to, you know, I forgot what the highest rank there. The rest of the people that could have got out of it, but so the guys come and pick me up from the EOD platoon, which is funny because I called them when I got there. I was like, hey, you guys need to come spring me for. They got me to some like JRC thing or something. Like I thought I was in the wrong spot. I'm like, hey, I got orders to this EOD platoon. What am I doing here? And they're like, nah, man, buy a book. You're going to be there for a week. You're not going anywhere, you know, kind of thing. I'm like, all right, fine. So I get to the company, and there's really, like I said, really there's nothing going on. There's guys just kind of blown out all over the winds to Cobra Gold and different stuff. And so my first kind of thing as an EOD tech was basically just like cleaning the supply room. And at the time they were refurbishing Hansen's ranges, right? So I was on Hansen so basically what would happen is in the morning I'd get trucked out to a construction site where the locals were, you know, clear cutting the hillside. And my gig was I would just kind of hang out behind them. And anytime their like weed whackers hit something and it went tink, they would stop. And so I would walk over there like fresh-faced EOD kid out of EOD school, and I would try to figure out like what their weed whacker hit and whether or not I needed to like flag it and like move past, or could I physically move it out of the way, or was it like an all stop kind of event, right? So to kind of peel the onion in your mind, you know, I don't know what they told these construction workers, but these dudes are just weed whacking away like in impact zones, right? So like, and one of the impact zones was for a law rocket, and if any EOD tech kind of listens to this afterwards, like the law rocket as a bomb is one of the more dangerous things you can find just laying on the ground. Like it literally says inside the publication, will go off for no reason.
Really?
Like, yeah, it's like that's in a technical manual.
I'm like, all right.
All right, cool.
Yeah.
So I was kind of tripped out about that. I was like, all right, well, I guess this is my new job, you know? And so somehow, and this is probably where all the TBI and everything sets in, but somehow it just ended up being me and Ed and Sam doing like responses on the island of Okinawa. So kind of how this works, like there's a main base team on Okinawa, and it's on Camp Butler. So I have no idea. I can't remember why we were getting calls for this stuff, but so they're doing construction everywhere in Okinawa. So they're always digging up World War II ordnance, right? So we got this call from like base housing on Butler or Foster, whatever it is, the big base there. And so we show up in our little Okinawan like four-door cab with like a little back kind of truck to it. It was our EOD response vehicle, so like our little Ghostbuster vehicle. Yeah. So we show up there, and you know, sure as shit, you know, there's some construction workers and like an MP or something like that standing next to a tractor next to a hole, or a steam shovel or something. And like, no kidding, there's like a bunch of World War II mortars that they just dug up. It's just sitting there, right?
That's crazy.
So we go in there and get to looking at them, you know, as all of us graduated school probably within 6 months of each other. So it's like the blind leading the blind in this fucking hole, right? And this is just kind of like a quick anecdotal funny story about times you didn't die as an EOD tech. So we're looking at this piece of ordnance, and we're trying to get nomenclature off of it, right? Like that's the best you can hope for as an EOD tech, is that whatever you're looking at has Mark 1, Mod 0. There it is. You know, it's like it's almost never wrong. You know, the dudes at the factory aren't stamping in wrong shit. So you can look inside your publication, you can see, okay, that's what it is. This is how the fuse works. It's cut and dry. So a lot of times, you know, rust gets in there, rust gets into the stamping. You can't mud, you know, these things just came out of the ground. So we're trying to see the nomenclature on this fuse because we can't quite tell what it is. And a lot of times on the body of a munition, you can use like WD-40, you know, just squirt WD-40 in there. If WD-40 gets on explosives, you're pretty much safe. In fact, it's one of the one of the desensitizing agents you can use against explosives that you're not quite sure about is WD-40. You know, oddly enough, like if you were coming up to a bunch of dynamite, sweating nitroglycerin, and you're like, oh shit, like one of the safest things you could do is, and I have to double check, but is WD-40. So we start putting WD-40 on this fuse to kind of like get the mud off. And as we start cleaning this fucking thing off, what we rapidly come to understand is it's a mechanical time fuse, right? So basically, if you're going to fire an Illume mission, the gun bunnies, you tell them how long as a dude calling for fire, you want that Illume up there. And then back in the pit, they do the math on their electronic, it's electronic nowadays, but back in the day it was mechanical.
Mm-hmm.
They'd be like, hey, we need, 25 minutes of Illume, or, however they do it. They'd slam the wrench on there, crank that mechanical time fuse, which is basically a fancy fucking oven timer, a fancy washing machine timer, to the appropriate burst height, etc. Once they do the math for the, what do you call that? The
trajectory from the FTC.
Yeah, trajectory. Yeah. And, that thing pops where it's supposed to pop. But basically what we were doing is we were lubricating what is potentially a stuck mechanical time fuse. So as soon as that dawned on us, we're like, oh shit, like, okay, this is dumb. Let's sort that out real quick. So that was kind of the stuff I got into in Okinawa for the first couple of months. About that time, everybody starts trickling back into the platoon. From overseas stuff, like the OIC finally trickles back in. In fact, they had me go in and take them a piece of paper without wearing my badge because like the dude had no idea that I was part of the fucking platoon, It's like, hey, go in and get the old man to sign this without your badge on, like, and whatever, just kind of a fucking joke. But so what they end up doing is they end up staffing the 31st MU team with a new batch of EOD techs, right? So I don't know if the old guys came back and rotated out, and so we were standing up the new 31st MU for the summer of 2004. So this would have been like June-ish time frame on the island, right? Mm-hmm. So they call me in the office and they're like, hey man, you got combat experience from OIF, right? I'm like, yeah. And they're like, okay, cool, well, you're going to go on the MU and do that, right? I can't remember if they knew we were going back to Iraq at the time or not, but so I was like, all right, cool. Like at this point I've been in security forces and the regular infantry, so I had basically no time on ship, right? I had no experience with a MU whatsoever, Marine Expeditionary Unit. So I meet the new my new EOD team leader, who's a gunny. My new teammate just came back off of a float, or not a float. He was in Cobra Gold doing something. So that guy's a staff sergeant named JT, and the team leader's this dude named what the fuck's his first name? Oh, whatever, Davis. Davis is his last name. So now Davis and JT is the gunny and the staff sergeant, and I'm the sergeant. And there's two other sergeants on the team, or three actually. You got me and this guy Jones and this guy Ed, and a dude named Kevin Freiberger, who was a funny story later on, and then I can't forget the other guy's name. So Ed and Kevin and the third guy's name, I can't remember. It's like Tyndall or something like that. They end up going to Force Recon. Like, so they get attached to the black side guys, right? So you got black side and green side EOD, just like you got black side and green side recon, right? So those three guys end up getting attached to the DRP on the 31st MU, which is like the Deep Reconnaissance Platoon, mm-hmm. which is essentially like the 31st MU's version of Force Recon.
Yeah.
And me and the other guys, we're going to be attached to the battalion landing team. Like, okay, cool. But we start our workup, and that's kind of where I did that chemical problem that we talked about the last time. And the black side guys, they disappeared to like Guam, and they did a bunch of Force Recon style stuff. And we end up getting on the boat. Oh, hey, by the way, happy early Marine Corps birthday.
Hey, you too. You too. I'm having some. What are you drinking? I'm having some bourbon.
I'm drinking like a sour of some sort.
Some Michter's. Small batch.
Hey, you don't look too bad for being over 200.
Yeah, I know, right? Yeah, tomorrow's the Marine Corps birthday. Are you going to anything for it?
Nah.
I don't know. I didn't know if that's something. You're still involved. Oh, that's true.
Yeah. Yeah, we got an email saying it was canceled, and I made fun of everybody about it.
Yeah. Oh, well. Not really but that's kind of fucked up. I know some units still did something on their own. They did shop functions instead of having like a full dinner and all that shit to get around it. It's so fucked up. I went to the post office the other day. We'll get back. Sorry, we'll get back to the EOD story.
Yeah.
I went to the post office yesterday, and I was walking in, and everybody had a mask on, and I saw the sign that said, "You need a mask," and I'm like, "What?" And I went back, got my mask, came back, and this guy's like, "Oh, I thought you were gonna I was gonna say something." He's like, you," and he was wearing a Marine hat too. He's like, "I was gonna say something." He's like, "And I thought you were gonna mess up, but you did." And I'm like, "I can't believe we're still doing this." I was like, "This is still a thing."
Right.
Like, whatever. Anyways, enough about that.
Yeah, I could fucking go on for
So
hours.
the mute, or they should be doing the fucking ball, in my opinion. But whatever.
Yeah, I think I posted something on one of the sites that was like the dudes doing it in Korea why they were retrograding against like 7 Chinese divisions or whatever it was.
Oh
in
yeah,
the
you
frozen
got that picture of Chesty Puller fucking cutting the cake and stuff. Yeah.
I'm like, well, these guys did it, but anyway. So we load up on the boat and we start steaming towards Kuwait, right? So we land in Kuwait. Like I forgot how long it took us to get there. We got to Kuwait in August. We left it at like July 14th or 15th like time frame, and we got to Kuwait in August, right?
Mm-hmm.
And at this time, this seems to be like a reoccurring theme up until like the later part of my career. Is like the word never really trickles down, man. Like I don't know what it is. Like it like stops at a certain level where you're like, hey, or like what are we doing here? Like nobody was like, hey, we're gonna go to Iraq. This is gonna be the thing. Like.
Mm-hmm.
Like I'm sure they had to have known in the MEU because that's a shit ton of logistics, right? You don't just pull into Kuwait and make it to Iraq. But
yeah.
So we spent some time in Kuwait, maybe a week or two. My memory's super fuzzy on this part. In the Udari ranges, Yep. It's just that flat tabletop, So we go out there, we blow some stuff up. I realized there was a bunch of ball busting as far as like being a new EOD detector in this time, but whatever. It's like, so sooner or later, we figure out we're going to go to Iraq. A few of us jump on a C-130 and go to Al Asad, and the others eventually truck up, right? So we hop on the C-130 and we fly up to Al Asad. We get there and we link up. First of all, so when I left the war in May of 2003, I thought it was pretty much over, right? Like we're all high-fiving local Iraqis. We're getting hugs. People that speak English are like turning in bath party people to us. And everything seemed like it was going to be fine, right? Like it seems like it was going well, right? So while I was in EOD school, you started hearing about the insurgency and you started hearing that shit was starting to come apart at the seams. And right about the time I was going through IEDs, you started seeing IEDs. Like it was the first couple of videos of like 1 or 2 soldiers with stuff blowing up near bushes and stuff, the real early stuff. And I was like, okay. So we land in Al Asad and the team there hasn't really been doing a lot of IED calls. They've been mostly on the base. I'm sorry. So let me go back to Al Asad. So this place looks like I don't know, some small city or some shit. For folks that aren't familiar with Al Asad,
yeah,
it's there's the flat desert on top of it. It's in northwestern Iraq, and the entire base is like situated down inside of almost like a crater. Like all the airfields are up on top on the flatlands, and then all the important stuff is down inside this crater. Which, if you think about it militarily, is pretty wise from a direct fire standpoint, right? Later on in life, they had some problems with people attacking them from being on that hill, like ISIS. But
yeah.
So inside this crater, it looks like fucking Las Vegas, man. Like there is literally like Friday night fights. There's like a boxing ring set up. Like we're walking around drinking like near beer and smoking cigars. Like the PX is the size of like fucking Walmart. And I'm looking around. I'm like, okay, like when did this happen, right?
Yeah, this doesn't feel like a war.
Yeah, I'm like, what's going on here? So the first jankety thing that kind of happened was we went up to link up with portions of the MEU that were going to be coming into the I think the air wing was coming into Al Asad there. So we went up to link up with some folks there, and we were going to look at. And once again, I have no idea how we got the tasking for any of this. I was pretty much just along for the ride at this point. we end up looking at an area where the air wing guys want to put their tents to support like the Cobras and everything, right? So we walk over there, and sitting on the ground is like a frapped in cluster bomb munition, like a CBU, right?
Oh, nice.
And I don't remember the exact nomenclature of it, but it's the ones that's full of fucking gator mines.
Mm-hmm.
So basically, there's a bunch of landmines in this thing, like stacked up all together. The airplane drops it, the thing busts open, spreads landmines all over the place, right? So I'm assuming that this was part of the SAS hit that place in the very beginning of the war. So that's probably how it went down. They were probably hitting it with cluster munitions. But now this shit's spread all over the ground, and so we're kind of letting the air wingers know, like, hey, you can't park tents here, but dude, there's landmines all over the ground over here, right? So we turned that over to the air wing guys that were there. That was like the first thing I saw in Iraq as a brand new EOD tech was some frapped in cluster bomb munition. So we ended up turning that over to the air wing guys. We did a demo range where I was with that guy that I told you that got killed by the ejection seat later.
Mm-hmm.
We just went out and blew up a bunch of shit in the desert, and we're like, oh, it's a pretty good time. All right. Well, so then we get the word that our whole team is going to go to Camp Fallujah. So I'm like, okay, cool. I had no idea where really Fallujah was at the time. On my push up, I made it to Baghdad. Once we were done, once Baghdad was secure, 3-7 loaded up on trucks. We ditched our AAVs. We loaded up on trucks. We went to Karbala, and we did security and stabilization operations, SASO, in Karbala for a couple months, or for a couple weeks before I left on the advance party.
Had you heard about in that in-between time of your deployments, had you heard about the contractors the Blackwater contractors that had been hung on the bridge?
Yes, but very vague. I can't remember if I knew because it was called Blackwater Bridge, right? I can't remember if I knew Blackwater Bridge was in Fallujah at the time. I just knew that it had happened.
Yeah.
As just a thing that you're aware of having had happened,
and there was like the massive battle afterwards, like the first battle of Fallujah.
Yeah, and I wasn't super tracking that either because I was in Okinawa at the time, and it wasn't just wasn't totally on my radar.
Yeah.
Yeah, and a lot of this information wasn't coming back from EOD techs that were there forward. Like there wasn't a massive talk between everybody that was going on. Like pretty much like nowadays, if you knew you're going to go replace somebody, nowadays you would have weeks, months of talking to the guy over over the classified system, so you could talk in the open about what you're about to deal with, et cetera. Mm-hmm. So we get to we take a 53 from Al Asad to Fallujah, link up there, and basically what we end up going into is like the RCT-7 combined EOD section. So what they kind of did was they kind of soaked in all these EOD techs from all over the place and sort of stuck them in one shop, and it was like basically the RCT-7 combined EOD shop. Well, that's what happened eventually. So what happened when I got there is our guys trucked up from Kuwait, and we all met up in Fallujah. And the guys that were at that were leading the EOD shop at the time were guys from first platoon EOD, I believe. So it was like a guy named Master Gunnery Sergeant Lasley, who's like a famous EOD guy for dudes that listen. It's like somebody's crotchety old uncle that had been in I think the dude joined the Corps in 1978, the year that I was born.
Oh, crazy.
Right. And so now he's this crusty Master Guns that's in charge of this thing, and he just fucking screams at everybody all the time. That's just kind of his thing. So
that's what they do.
We get broken down into response teams. So my response team is now me, Gunny Davis, JT, the staff sergeant, and a corpsman. So while we were doing the MEU workup and while we were trucking with the MEU, we managed to since we were in the MSSG, whatever that stands for, MEU Service Support Group 31, right?
Marine Service Support Group.
There you go, Marine Service Support Group 30. Yeah. So we were in MSSG 31, which also had the medical folks in it. Mm-hmm. So we were able to link up with the medical guys and be like, hey, who is your most experienced corpsman? Like we're the bomb guys. If we show up, it's because somebody already got blown up or somebody's going to get blown up. Like we need your best guy, right? So they had this guy named Andres Narano, awesome dude, who had actually done time in like a LA County emergency room. So, some sort of thing that he had done for training. So, he's seen dudes get shot, all kinds of shit. So we're like, okay, cool. So Andres just became like the other member of our team. I mean, this guy was crimping blasting caps by the time we were all done. And like, so the EOD team is now me, Gunny Davis, JT, and Narano. So basically what happens is there's not really any sort of like OJT. What they say, there's two other EOD teams that are running at the time. There's this dude named Master Sergeant Daly, and there's this dude named Garza. And they're kind of doing left seat, right seat. So one team would go out for like 24 to 48 hours. And by go out, I mean you'd be manning the radio listening for 9 lines. So anytime a 9 line would come in, so for folks out there that haven't been there, a 9 line is a reporting procedure. When a unit out in the shit, whether they're patrolling, doing whatever, they would find an IED or they would find a weapons cache. They would get on the horn back to their CP and give a 9-line report, right? I don't remember what all 9 lines of them are about, but obviously it's like their location, suspected type of whatnot, whatever it is. So we would get those 9 lines, we would radio over to the security element, which at the time I got there was reservists. And they would sort of be your PSD to take the EOD truck out of Fallujah to go handle business. So basically it was like, hey, I can't remember if our team leader, Gunny Davis, went and hung out with them for a while, or I don't even remember how the whole thing started. What I do remember from my side is I got handed an iRobot PackBot, which was like fresh out of the box. We never trained with this thing. We didn't have them in EOD school. Like we had the giant Johnny 5 robot in EOD school. And they're like, hey, here's this fucking robot. Like we're going to go do roadside IEDs in approximately like 3 days. It's going to be our turn in the rotation. So figure this fucking thing out. So how it was going to work was JT was a driver because he had done like the bill, whatever that racing training. We would send dudes to racing training, basically. It was like Bill Scott Raceway, BSR, I think it was what it was called. And they would teach you. Yeah. Okay. It's pretty common school. Basically they would teach you like pit techniques, and they would teach you, it was like cop driving, but for the military.
I know what you're talking about.
So he would drive the truck. JT was Gunny Davis was the vehicle commander, so he'd be on the horn taking down 9 lines, like writing on the glass with a grease pencil. I was sitting in the left rear vehicle, and I was at like demolitions and just the slack man on the team. And then we had our doc who would just did everything that needed to be done, right? So I figured this robot out, and basically we kind of talk our way through it. And how it works is, so we would get a 9 line. So this is like August, September, October type time frame. We get a 9 line, and we drive out to meet them, link up with whoever the on-scene commander was. Gunny Davis would go to that guy and start getting the what's what. As soon as we would pull up, we'd break the robot out and on the tailgate of the truck, fire it up, and we would start prepping demolition charges or getting ready to prep a demolition charge, right? And to me, this was the preferred method of doing business at the time. We just blew everything up. Like we weren't trying to, our team, like we weren't trying to recover shit. Like the whole forensic thing hadn't really become the new in vogue. So to me, what made sense was, you move up, get eyes on the thing, destroy it, look for any obvious secondaries, and then get back on the road. So our AO was basically all around the city of Fallujah. So basically we would take we were responsible for Route Mobile, which covered the east side of Fallujah, and Michigan, which later became Fran, which kind of ran Fallujah, and that's where the Blackwater Bridge was. It was on Michigan or Fran. And so basically we would just do roadside IEDs all around Fallujah, because what was happening in the time that we were only sort of marginally aware of was they were doing the preparatory actions to assault the city, right? Like so basically LAR would do probing attacks to the south, right? Because during the April attack, the first assault on Fallujah, they came from the south into they went south to north. They went from the south of the city into the southern part of the city, because it's kind of an industrial zone. It's kind of like warehouses and factories and shit down there. I guess it gave them ease of movement to move into there instead of the congested part of the northern city. So what they were doing for this time around is they were prepping the South, like doing feints, right? They would push up with LAR, get in contact, break contact, right? They wanted to make them think that we were coming from the South again. So, we're just kind of cleaning up IEDs as they do these operations.
What kind of
Uh,
IEDs were you seeing? Like, what was the common thing? Were you seeing like stuff that was pretty well hidden? They used to like camouflage stuff in sidewalks. They used to camouflage stuff in curbs, or just throw it in dead bodies of animals and stuff like that. What were you guys seeing? Was it the 155 rounds and stuff like that, or different kind of bombs?
it was primarily 155s with either a long range cordless telephone as a trigger or a command wire for a trigger.
Mm,
Nobody had really started fucking with pressure plates in Iraq. It was
okay.
all command of some sort. So
Mm,
the command wire would run out to some firing point, or they would have long range cordless telephones, which is basically like your old 1990s ghetto cell phone. It's actually a regular telephone. It's just run into a base station, right?
yeah.
So they would either plug the base station in with a battery, like a motorcycle battery or something to power the whole thing.
Mm,
And then one way they could do it is call the base station, which would ring it. Or if it was the phone downrange, one of the ways they could do it is like the page telephone thing, where you're like, hey, where's my phone inside my house?
mm,
They hit that thing and it makes the phone ring. And you're like, oh, there it is right there, right? But that would be the bomb. Oh, those little walkie-talkies, so like your little Motorola push-to-talks,
yeah.
like the little blue and black.
Yeah.
Those were pretty popular. Um,
And just keying those would set them off, right? And how they had them set up.
yeah, so some of them it was like that.
That's so
Was so you
crazy.
so you had to start telling the guys because a lot of guys didn't have Marine Corps issued PRR radios or any sort of squad radio of their own because I don't know reasons. And so a lot of units on their own dime or whatever invested in those little Motorola push to talks, right?
Mm,
So we had to kind of tell guys like, hey, dude, if you happen to be on an IED frequency, channel when just because Murphy hates you, uh, you're gonna set off an IED. Like, I don't remember if there's any recorded instances of that happening, but it was definitely
a
on the threat
possibility.
side, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
So it became known to us basically that if you were on target for any longer than like 45 minutes, you were going to get attacked, right? So as soon as the truck stopped, I would start my stopwatch because like 45 minutes into it, you're either getting direct fire, from the city with small arms, or they're going to start launching rockets and mortars at you.
Hmm.
Um, and our security element at the time was like Johnny on the spot. These reservists, a couple of them had like duck calls up in the turret, and they would like duck call to each other. I think they were from Louisiana, and like those dudes, like if anything like pushed the cordon at all, they would just open fire. So they had been there for longer than us. I don't know how many casualties those dudes had taken, but like their patience with risk was zero by the time they became our security element.
Were these Marine
Uh,
reservists or Army reservists?
yeah, they were Marine reservists.
Okay.
Um, So I don't that whole time frame kind of bleeds together. I think Garza's team had the record of 9 lines in like a 24 to 48 hour period, which is like nine. So like nine IED calls in a day. And that's one day. So
Yeah.
every 3 days you answered anywhere from 1 to 9 IED calls. And that's why they're like my brain is just like one long like scratching record of get out of truck, set charge, drive robot down. So basically, the way we came up to do it that we thought was the best was once we knew where it was, I would send the robot down there to recon it real quick, right? So as soon as I even had the vaguest idea of where this thing was, I would start punching the robot down because I was the team robot operator. I would locate this thing, you know. Most of the times they weren't well hidden, it was ground surface laid. It was behind a bush. They were mostly artillery rounds, so it wasn't super hard to find these things. They weren't super well hidden, right? So I didn't bother trying to disarm the thing with a robot. None of that bullshit. Once I figured out where it was, I just brought the robot straight back, and JT would hook the charge on it. So the way we did it was we had a remote fire detonator, military piece of gear. I forgot the nomenclature for it. It's like the 132 or something like that. Basically, it's a remote detonator, right? So
Hmm.
We took a little a wire spool that the Israelis came up with. It's basically like this little tiny black piece of, it almost looks like an old Kodak film case, but there's like 100 yards of wire in that fucking thing. So we had that taped directly to the remote detonator with the lead wires coming out. So we would attach the electric detonator onto those, sync that into a block of C4. The block of C4 had a zip tie taped to it at the top, and that was like the little lanyard that we put on the claw. So on the robot's claw, which is weird because it goes sideways like this on the packbot, I would put the remote fire detonator on the inside and the explosive charge on the outside, and then close the claw. Drive that thing back down there, and when I got down to the site, I would open the claw, drop the C4 onto the IED, close the claw, like back the robot up slowly so it's paying wire out, and I would give it, a good standoff, 20, 30, 50 yards, depending on what the charge was, and set the remote detonator on the ground, and then bring the robot all the way back. We get everybody locked up in their trucks. We get them to hunker down, get dudes in defilade, and we'd fucking crank that thing off and blow it up. I'd get the robot back down there, make sure there was nothing else big, do a quick little cursory sweep around, and then that was it. Pack our shit up and get out of there.
How often were you seeing secondaries blowing up that you didn't initially see?
During that time, zero.
Okay.
During that time on those roadside responses, we didn't see.
They hadn't started doing that yet.
No, not really. Okay. There were daisy chains where you're like, oh, there's 4 or 5 of these things tied to det cord, So for the folks that aren't tracking or haven't seen that awful Hurt Locker movie, how the day
widely renowned by military members to be one of the worst military movies that have ever been made.
Yeah, and of course it wins an Oscar. Right?
Widely acclaimed in the media because it's the first Oscar for a female director, I believe. That's why.
Probably what it is.
We even talked about it in one of my classes at SDSU, and they're like, yes, this is a great stride in movie making. And they're like, what do you think about this movie? You were in the military. And I was like, to be honest, everyone in the military hates that movie. Like, it's the most ridiculous, EOD techs aren't snipers, aren't they're not, everything about it was just ridiculous.
Yeah. Hey guys, let's just get in our truck by ourselves and drive out in Iraq somewhere. Like, you'll be,
For sure.
So,
for sure.
So we were able to really get in, get out. We got it down until it was a pretty solid routine, except for this one evening. And this was kind of our I don't know, our white elephant night or some shit. Like, so it's evening time, it's our 3rd or 4th call of the day. It's nighttime, and what it is it's an IED that's under just slightly past an overpass on Route Mobile. So we come from the south from Camp Fallujah. The city's on our left, which is bad juju, right? Because the whole eastern side of Fallujah have been bombed and shelled into just wrecked buildings, because that's where the bad guys would be when they were firing onto Route Mobile. And they actually built a military bypass to the right of Mobile, which was a little bit in a little bit of defilade because Mobile was kind of built up.
Yeah.
So we're on Mobile. We stop, we link up with the grunts that are there doing their thing, and so what this thing turns out to be is the bottom half of a 55-gallon drum. So long story short, we get everything set up as per the usual. This evening, we have a ride along with us. We left our corpsman home, and we took another guy with us named Chris Sitt, who was an EOD tech that was coming in. And he was on the advance party from, I think he might have been on a MEU or something. So he just hopped in with us. And later on, he was in MARSOC with us. So he just hopped in with us to get the lay of the land, right? Super cool dude. So, we hop out, we do our thing. Davis goes and talks to the on-scene commander, figures out where it is. I screen the robot down there to get the eyes on it. I see it. I kind of use the robot. The camera on the robot is slightly behind the claw. So I kind of, there's a white bag on the road. I kind of investigate the white bag a little bit, and that's where I can see that it's like a 55-gallon drum with bulk explosives in it, right? So they would take artillery rounds, landmines, all this crazy shit, and saw them open and get the explosives out.
That's crazy.
And put it in different stuff.
Yeah.
So I'm like, cool, no problem. Drive the robot back because we're just gonna do our thing. Start driving the robot down there again. I get down to the IED. I do the claw trick. I drop the C4 charge directly on top of the bulk explosives. I start backing up and the fucking thing stops working, right? Like, and here's the thing about these like $150,000 robots. Like they don't, like they're advertised that they're supposed to go 300 meters because 300 meters is kind of EOD's magic number for like frontal and overhead cover kind of shit. That thing might go 90 meters. Like if it's a clear day, you know, if you're not in any sort of terrain.
Just because of the radio signal?
Yeah, radio signal, like who knows, right? So this has happened to me before where the thing has died. And normally it's not a big deal, right? You do the old thing where you turn it off and turn it back on again. It kind of like hard reboots the controller, and then that resyncs it with the robot, and you're usually off to the races again. So I try that, nothing happens. I try like several things of immediate action, nothing happens. And I'm like, okay, shit. So we sit there and we talk about it for a second. And what's funny is Sit is kind of staying quiet during all this, and just kind of letting Gunny Davis do his thing. And so we come up with the bright idea, me and JT, that here's what we'll do. We didn't have a turret gun in our truck for some unknown reason. In hindsight, that was really stupid. But I was like, okay, cool. I'll get up in the turret with the radio controller, right? Sort of like name tape defilade, you know. I'll be like down low. You know, JT, drive towards this fucking bomb, and I'll keep restarting this thing until we get comms with it. This is our bright idea, right? So that's what we start doing. So we're creeping towards this bomb. This is all blacked out, right?
Yeah.
And we're on nods, you know, and we're getting closer, and we're getting closer, and finally, like both of us are like, man, this is fucking dumb. Let's not do this anymore, right? We kind of like, I forgot exactly how the conversation went down, where we're just like, hey man, if we're this close, we might as well just fucking get out, you know. So we throw the thing in reverse and back up. We're like, okay, that didn't work. So we're like, okay. We're starting to, at this point, we're starting to discuss that the robot might be a loss, right? So the next thing we tried doing is we tried just cranking the charge off. I was like, well, hey, look, the explosives is sitting right on the IED, right? You know, maybe the robot will survive the detonation, maybe it won't. You know, I backed off maybe 6-7 feet when it died. So I was like, hey, let's just crank it off. You know, like we got stacks of these things back in the rear. You know, you kind of get your balls busted if you lose a robot, but up until then we had not. Other teams had, but it was like, who cares? These things are supposed to get lost, right?
Yeah, better that than you. Yeah.
Yeah, so that's what we try to do. So we break out the detonator, the remote detonator. We wake it up, and because there's a process for safety that you had to do to kind of like wake it up, you know. And that thing is shit in the bed, nothing, right? Now in hindsight, like nobody had the forethought to kind of discuss like whether there were jammers on, because jammers were kind of a new thing at this point, right? Like some dudes had jammers, some dudes didn't, some dudes knew how they worked. There was like 15 different kinds. There was like warlocks and
I didn't even know they had jammers that early on.
Yeah, like they were all over the place, right?
Okay.
So we didn't have the forethought, we didn't have the situational awareness to like ask anybody else in the convoy, like, hey, are you guys running a jammer, or is compass call on station? Like, is anything jamming this ship? Because nothing, like basically nothing we were doing remote wise was working. So we're like, all right, well, that didn't work. So I was like, well, hey, we got this DMR in the fucking truck, right? Because EOD techs are issued precision rifles. We get DMRs, an M14 that's basically tricked out. It was the same DMR that the security forces guys had for, you know, like urban sniping, basically. And some of us got the Sasser, the 50 cal, the M82 A1 or whatever I think it is. We're like, hey, look, let's go to the overpass, you know, and just dump rounds into the bulk HE and see what happens, right? So we go up there, JT gets on the gun, and the thing's dialed in just fine. You know, I shot it, he shot it before up in Kuwait. We know the thing is on, and he starts dumping rounds into it. This problem is we're hitting it with sniper rounds. So we're hitting it with like Alpha 11 hollow point 7.62, right? The precision ammunition. And it's not doing shit, right? Like military explosives are designed to be able to take stuff like that and not go up, right? Because, you know, if the ammo truck gets lit up with a with a Dishka, you can't have the whole 7-ton going up just because a couple rounds got hit, you know. So that stuff in the movies where you just shoot explosives and it goes off is mostly bullshit.
Didn't you guys have any kind of HEI, like the high explosive incendiary rounds?
So we fixed ourselves after this night. We stripped everything out of the magazines and we backfilled them with tracer rounds. But then we never had to use the gun again.
Of course.
So, of course. So we're like, okay, shit, now what? Well, we get down there, and so Gunny Davis is starting to think about calling back on the satellite phone to Master Guns Lasley. And Chris Sitt is like, hey, John, if you want to maintain your team leader status, you will not call Master Guns, right? Because Master Guns Lasley was firing motherfuckers at the cyclic rate, right? Like, if he didn't think that you were, like, holding your water as a team chief, like, you were getting shit canned. Like, that was, you would hear him screaming on the phone in the CP, and you'd be like, damn, who the fuck is Master Guns Lasley lighting up? And then he'd be like, you got any fucking questions about that, Major? And then and we'd like, oh shit. And then he would like slam the phone down. We'd be like, was that dude just chewing out a Major? Because he just didn't care, man. The dude had been in for 30 years. Like, what are they gonna do? Send him home from Fallujah, you know?
Sure, yeah.
What are they gonna do? Shave his head and send him to Iraq?
Yeah, for sure.
So then Davis is like, okay. So here's where. So now we've decided that the robot is going to be a complete loss. So for some unknown reason, Davis liked to carry the M79. We had an M79 in the truck too. Like we basically just had a cornucopia of weapons in there, and he liked to carry his M9 and the M79, which in hindsight, in combat, I'm like the dumbest thing. But anyway,
that's like a weird Call of Duty loadout.
Yeah, it's like
got my grenade launcher and I got my pistol. We're good.
Yeah, it's like, hey, that might have been cool in Vietnam, bro. But so he goes down the road a little bit, takes a knee, and starts launching 40 Mike at this fucking thing, right? So he probably launches like 6-7 grenades at this thing. And I'm like, yo, we have fired the DMR. We fired an M79 at this thing at this point. Like, if they don't know where we're at now, like, this is getting bad to go, right? So at this point, I look around at one of the security guys, and I don't remember if I saw a javelin on. No. There was a tow gunner, and so I think this might have been my bright idea as a former 51. But I was like, hey, dude, like, look, the guy's got a precision weapon sight right there. Like, let's just fire the fucking missile at this thing. So they have to radio in to fire the missile, which was interesting for me, because if you remember last episode, they were slinging those things like candy on the way in. So they must have slowed down somewhere between now and then. So here's what we do next. We fire a tow missile at this fucking thing. So everybody like backs up, because now shit's getting good, right? Now guys are like, oh, hey, hold on. Like, because normally everybody's like, come on the fuck on, EOD, do your shit. Let's go.
Yeah.
So they fire the missile at this thing. So this thing fires and goes erratic under the bridge. The gunner said he got whited out. Whatever. I wasn't on the site. I've never fired a tow. I'm not criticizing the dude, but the missile goes under the bridge and just goes slinging off into Iraq somewhere. And I'm just like,
Jesus.
I'm like, okay, well, I had fucked with a clue, right? Cause I was on 0351. Like, and for those of you who ain't tracking, the clue is the sight to the javelin. And it's one of the more advanced weapon sights that we have, right? Like it's like you could put your hand against an armored vehicle like a kilometer away and take it away, and like the clue will read the heat from like your handprint. It's a trip. And I was like, well, hey, look, that thing's a top-down munition, right? So let's fire it over the fucking bridge, and just smash the IED right in place. And so I start talking to the guy, and he's like, yeah, we got javelins, but we don't have clue batteries. And I'm just like, Jesus, this is the fucking dumbest night on earth.
Jeez, yeah, for real. We're professionals, right, guys?
Yeah.
We're professionals.
So Sit, at this point, who's a super high-speed, soft EOD guy, and later on in life, and kind of at this point too, is basically like, hey, dude, I'll go down there right now and cut that fucking thing apart, right? Like clearly nobody's cranked it off. It's pitch black. Like, who knows what we did to it by now, But Davis is like, no, I'm the team leader. I got to do it. That's kind of thing in EOD is like, if you're the team leader, you take the long walk, right? Like,
oh, really?
Yeah, that was basically how it's supposed to be on EOD teams. Is like if anybody has to do the manual approach, at the end of the day, it's going to be the team chief. Which is why if you look at our casualties, it's a shit ton of master sergeants, gunnies, staff sergeants, senior staff sergeants, because if anybody has to risk themselves, it's going to be the most senior guy, right? So finally, Davis is like, "Fuck it, I'll do it." So he finally goes down there, and I think he took like a whole satchel charge with him, if I remember correctly, and ended up just like popping this fucking satchel charge and winging it close, and that just like
running,
just blew the thing off the fucking road, man.
Jeez.
And so that ended the fucking fiasco of that night, man. Like we got back to Camp Fallujah, and I'm like standing outside near the little burn barrel and like smoking a cigarette, and Chris came over to me and he's like, "Yo, bro, is it always like that?"
Yeah.
And I was like, "Nah, you don't want to talk bad about your team. I don't care anymore. But like, it is what it is. They did their weird mistakes, and I did all of my mistakes. Like,
yeah, it happens, man. It happens. We had when we were doing the turnover in Afghanistan with 3-9, I think I was with 3-6 at the time in 2011. They had all their advanced party people, so it was like their operations officer, their XO, I think maybe the fires chief, which was my buddy, and a few other people. And we're like, hey, it's winter time. It's been kind of quiet lately. Nothing crazy's going on. And then, of course, that night or that day, we find 2 IED emplacers, or we find some IED emplacers. We have a convoy that thinks they hit an IED. They're like, we're not sure. There was like a fire, so it was like a low order det.
Okay.
So we're like, okay, well, we'll send an ISR asset back to check the spot out to see if there was an IED there. When we did, we caught the dudes digging, putting in more shit. And I think they saw the ISR or something like that, and they jumped on motorcycles and were trying to run off. And so they're on the motorcycles going. We request air. The JTAC has Cobras on station, Dorothy, and that's his call sign. And these guys are running, and they're on the motorcycles running. It looks like it's open desert, and he sends up the 9 line. We're gonna shoot a Hellfire at the first one, take them out. So he shoots the first one, Hellfire, hits it, knocks the guys off the bike, kills those guys. And then they're going to follow up with rockets and guns on the second motorcycle. And so that first one hits, boom, and they're coming in for the second one. And we're all watching this on the screen, on the feed. We can see what they can see. And they're like, in 250 or in from the south or whatever, calling their end call. And the JTAC's like, cleared hot, meaning that they can shoot. And then right after he says cleared hot on the screen, we see this compound come into view. And we're all like, well, the Cobra's not going to shoot right there with the compound. And he does, and he completely misses the road, because they're riding right next to this compound, and strafes this compound with rockets and guns. And we're just like, oh my god. And this, like, all the people, the advance party for the unit that was coming in to take over for us, we're all in there watching this, and they're like, what the fuck is going on here? Like, what the... And then we went and sent a team to that compound to make sure everybody was okay. And no one got killed in the compound, but there was like 9 people there, Afghans in their houses chilling. So, yeah, shit happens, man. It's like, war's fucking weird.
Well, that's also a testament to how tough those fucking compounds are.
Oh, dude, in Afghanistan?
Dude,
oh, yeah.
I might, when I get to my farm, I might build a place out of mud just because it was so fucking tough. Like,
yeah, it's crazy. For people that haven't seen it, man, you can't shoot through it. You can't sit there and hit it with, like, unless you have like a tank. Like shooting a 50 cal at a mud wall in Afghanistan is almost pointless. It's just
nothing.
It's going to take a long time for it to chip through it to get through it. It's so strong. All the buildings I saw that were destroyed, like, it took me a minute to realize. I'm like, wait, these are all destroyed because of the war. They're not destroyed because they're old ass fucking mud huts. That this has been destroyed because of the war, not because of any kind of, because they're strong as fuck. Yeah, it's pretty crazy. But yeah, dude, back in Fallujah.
So that takes us up to like November timeframe, right? So November, we start getting the word that we're going to assault this city. And by getting the word, I mean, like a couple days before, all of us in the EOD, and also during this time, a Navy team showed up. They basically soaked all the EOD guys. The Al-Assad team came down and joined in. other guys came in from other places, basically from like Al-Qaim, other EOD. So shit, there was probably, I don't even know, like maybe 30 of us,
Oh wow, that's quite a
all
bit.
said, you know, including the Navy guys. The Navy guys that were on the boat with us showed up, you know, and in the beginning, all the teams were pretty organic to their original unit. So the Navy
Mm-hmm.
guys were all together, you know, the Marines were all together, and so we get like essentially the Frago one evening with on the map. Basically saying like, all right, boys, check it out. Like, we're gonna assault this city. The order came through, and they started pointing out like who was go. It was like like teams and shit. It was like, okay, like you guys are gonna go with 3-5. You guys are gonna go with 3-1. You guys are gonna go with 1-3. So for the initial part, we got tasked initially with helping the HQ set up the ASP, the resupply ASP at the mobile and Fran like Cloverleaf.
Yeah, the ammunition supply
Um,
point.
yeah, and then after that, we were going to link up with the Army's like 2-2 cavalry. So essentially, from north to south, arrayed along the northern edge of the city, you had 1-3, 3-1, 3-5, 1-8. Um, I feel like I'm missing somebody in there. LAR was doing like blocking positions all around. The SEALs were going to take down the main hospital that evening, which was across the river in like the southwestern side of Fallujah. So LAR was kind of block that in, and the SEALs were going to go directly there.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and then the Army's 2-2 Cav, which was like a Bradley unit, was going to sort of do the like the left hook towards the Cloverleaf, towards the industrial sector, right? So you
Mm-hmm.
had LAR blocking the south, um, the Army sort of the southeast, and all the Marines were going to come from the north over the train tracks. There was a set of train tracks on the northern part of the city, and they're basically going to breach those and go in there. So we basically just got we got our lanes, and we got like our marching orders, right? Like, hey, go link up with your guys, do your thing, fucking Godspeed. We'll see, we'll see you on the
See
other
you on the
side,
other
right?
side. Yeah, Jesus,
Yeah.
dude. What was the
I'm like,
what was the vibe? You know, like what was the vibe in the camp? Like, oh shit, man, this is for real. And two, I mean, I remember this happening even in the United States. I remember seeing it on the news. It was on the news, and they're like, "Hey, they have the city encircled. They're dropping leaflets and they're sending out messages telling them like, if you're a civilian, you need to get out of the city. Everyone's going to be declared hostile." Like, this was not a like impromptu attack. This was a very
no,
deliberate. They surrounded the city, choked them off, and everything. So like,
right.
what was the vibe like of everybody? You know, in the moments before, like, holy shit, because you were there for the invasion. Was it that
Yeah,
similar kind of feeling, or?
it was kind of like that. So the staging area for us was there's a little like old Iraqi army camp that was just to the north of the Camp Fallujah. I forgot the name of it. I think 3-5 was hanging out over there. And so we staged over there, and it was just like the invasion. It was just trucks, tanks, like everything that was going to go forward, right?
Mm-hmm.
Uh, Along certain like phase timelines, units would depart, right? Like you were already saying, the blocking positions were already in place. Um, and they had already conducted the psychological operations you're talking about, which is to say, hey, we're coming for. They basically told them when we were coming, like
Yeah.
not actual D-Day H hour, but the rough time. They're like, hey, we're gonna come take this city back. If you're a military age male, don't even bother leaving. Like, women and children get out, and those people did. It was like essentially a ghost town as far as women and children were concerned in there. And I should have kept this card, but we got our rules of engagement card. It was like a little blue card that got passed out to everybody, and I forgot where the hell happened to that thing, but like
That'd be a cool
it
thing
was
to have.
probably it was some of the better rules of engagement I'd ever seen. Right, basically it was essentially any military age male you see who isn't immediately surrendering is pretty much a fair target. Like, because they figured if they were running, they were moving from one weapons cache to another weapons cache. Because you know
Mm-hmm.
how they would get their jihad on from one spot, you know, dump their shit, move unarmed from there to another spot where the other mouse holes and murder holes were,
Yep.
and engage again from there, trying to play the little game like, oh, I'm not touching you, kind of shit. Um, well, that was a no go for this time around. It was like if they didn't immediately surrender, like they were cleared hot because there was suicide vests. The perfidy is a big thing where people. That's basically if I pretend like I'm surrendering, I walk up to you and clack off my suicide vest. Perfidy, right? Um,
I've never heard that term before.
I could be fucking it up, but I'm pretty sure that's it. Uh, so I mean, those were the rules of engagement, man. It was like, hey boys, like this is game on. So we're like waiting for the sun to go down. Basically, I'm laying on the hood of my truck, smoking a cigarette, just thinking to myself like, oh well, here we go. Like I'm not sure how I got myself into this again. But,
you get what you ask for. You know what I'm saying? Sometimes you get what you ask for.
If you play a stupid game, you win a stupid prize, right? So we got the truck totally prepared. Like we went through it and loaded magazines into everything. We got everything ready for, for business. So
what real quick before, what were you guys planning for? Were you planning to be like, I mean, like you were already doing, just responding to IED calls, or were you going to be there to help breach maybe hardened targets? Like what did they tell you your role was going to be?
So that's a good question. We weren't told anything really. It was
just see what happens.
Yeah, it was like, hey, respond. It was like respond to whatever they call for, right? It was I mean, like it's just how shit turns out. And for anybody that like sometimes I want to feel like all of these times I'm saying that I was never told anything was like just some anecdotal thing and everybody else knew what was going on and I was the only fucking shitbag, right? Because I have like low self-esteem despite all the shit I've done in my life. It's like some childhood layback thing. Okay. But I listened to your interview with Fred Galvin because I wanted to hear his side of the story from a caliber of dude like that, right? Mm-hmm. Like, because I've been pretty much a clown my entire life. I've always been like the mouthy kid. I've always been the smart ass dude in the back who's just making stupid comments and like not taking anything seriously. So normally when I say something's all fucked up or I didn't know what was going on, like I just take it that it was my fault. I should have been more mature. I should have went and found somebody and asked. But when you hear Fred Galvin say, yeah, we had no idea where we were going. Like they didn't tell us anything. I'm like, well, that dude's a special operations commander. Mm-hmm. Like, okay, I don't feel bad anymore that I had no idea what the fuck was supposed to happen, right? So we were going to assault the city. That was going to happen. And then everything after that was going to be initiative-based tactics, I guess. IVT,
There was probably a really sweet PowerPoint with a really awesome plan explaining exactly what you were going to do sitting on some commander's laptop or desk. And he was briefed on it, but the guys that were actually doing it were never actually told. There was probably some sweet-ass like brief that got hours and hours and hours of work to create for just the higher up to feel good about the plan that no one below them actually know, That's how it works. That's why shit gets fucked up.
Like the individual infantry platoon commanders probably had outstanding TBS 100% graded like battle plans that they rock drilled out with their crews off their troop leader's notebook, and they probably like did a shit ton of rock drills on a terrain model. And then probably what happened was nobody was like, hey, should we get the attachments in here and tell them, the engineers, the EOD guys, the fucking like
for sure.
Everybody that's gonna come with us, the tank commander. That probably did not happen. But so the sun drops and we move out to our battle positions. I actually didn't make it into the city the first night. I made it to the Cloverleaf and helped set in the ASP. So we took a trailer out there with a shit ton of explosives, just stacks and stacks of satchel charges. And actually, I rode out there pulling that trailer with the master guns. Like, so this 1978 master guns is in the truck with me, right? And he's just grouchy and bitchy the whole time. So we set up there, and so we can see the edge of the city, right? Like we're like 500 yards from the edge of the city kind of thing, right? And H hour starts creeping up, and I can't even recall if they told us when H hour was going to be. But essentially, I could already see the Spectre gunships, like there's two of them as far as I can remember, doing like slow left-hand circles above the city, right? Because all the guns stick out the left-hand side. So like that thing, you look up and you see that school bus, and you can hear the low drone of the C-130, which later on in life was like my like lullaby. I would fall asleep to that thing, right? But so I get it's coming, right? Like you can almost feel the fucking the charged air. And then just at a certain point, the preparatory fire started hitting that city, right? Like, so all hell Like it was sort of like the wrap rounds that I remember from the invasion of OIF-1,
Mm-hmm.
but instead of being like way behind, I was like at the business end, right? So you could see just uh, artillery rounds getting fired. What's it called? Sheafs. When you
Yeah, sheath.
when yeah, sheaf, like when you fire linear sheafs of artillery rounds, so
Yeah.
those things start screaming in. So basically, they were firing as far as the way they had the air racked and stacked. So the first thing that went down was all the airdrops, right? So
Mm-hmm.
like all the wings level GBUs were taking out all the hard targets because we had seen video of them fortifying this thing, right? We'd seen them turning entire roads into serpentines,
Yeah.
like filling roads full of fucking debris. Um, all of it was oriented to the south because that's where they thought we were coming. So they're just hitting these hard targets. Like we know pretty much where the insurgent HQs are basically. So they're just smashing those things. And then the next thing that would happen was you would start to see the Spectres engage. So those things are just circling around the top, and you just see that angry 30 millimeter cannon of God just raking up and down streets, and the 105s are just screaming down in there. And then the last thing that happened was they fired Mikliks, so line charges. So for anybody that's not tracking a line charge, it's a 2,000 feet of or 1,000 feet. It's a
It's a lot
long
of. It's a big ass thing of blocks of C4, right?
yeah. It's a rocket that they fire, and
Yeah.
attached to the ass end of the rocket is a rope, and on this rope, like every foot is like I forgot, I'm a bad EOD tech. It's like I'm an IED tech, not an EOD tech. Is massive chunks of fucking explosives, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So they fire those things over the train tracks to the north, which blows the train tracks apart like ribbons, and then those guys go storming into the city. And really, I just got a chance to watch the initial breach while sitting on the top of the truck, just smoking a cigarette, watching this place get fucked up. Like we took fire at our position, and from somebody,
Mm-hmm.
and basically one of the upgunners on a 7-ton with a 50 cal mowed down whoever was giving us that, and that was the big hubbub for us that night. Um, the next morning, some of the teams started rolling in. They had already blown weapons caches, so they were kind of rolling in to resupply ammo. So we were kind of getting the data dump from them, like, hey man, like shit's for real in there. And you can hear just constant. So this is now dawn of like the first day, and you can just hear constant combat coming from the town. You can hear airstrikes are going down, and we got the order to go in the second night or the once again the timelines are pretty hazy. I think it was either the second night or the third night of the actual assault. We got pushed in to link up with the 2-2 because they had made their first initial foothold into the city, which I think their CO and their sergeant major got killed, if I remember correctly, like just in house-to-house combat in the first couple of nights. So we push up and we link with them. We link up with them within the first like 24 to 48 hours.
Real quick, what was it like rolling up to the city? Now you're rolling up, and it's already been worked for 2 days or whatever. And, they've been clearing, they've been doing all this different stuff. Something just fucking fly. What was it like rolling in there and seeing like the damage that had been done to this point? Because it had to have been surreal to be on the outside watching all this happen. I'd been wishing for like a really good soundtrack that would be playing in the background while like watching all that happen.
Yeah. I think the PSYOP guys were playing it. I don't remember what they played. Their big ass loudspeakers.
Yeah,
I think it was for Whom the Bell Tolls from Metallica.
Nice.
Like, hey guys, you asked for it. Here it is, right? It was a trip because you could see the destroyed city on the eastern outskirts from all the times we were on mobile. But once we finally got into the industrial sector, which is where I started my adventures in Fallujah. The industrial sector was wired for sound. Like every single building had like rockets and missiles and shit pointed out the windows that were set to command wires. So, and it was mainly deserted. It was it was a cross between a ghost town and like a firing alley or like a fucking gun range. It would seem like a ghost town, and then like an entire burst of PKM fire would just come screaming down the fucking street. Like, basically the streets were like, they're linear danger areas doctrinally, but those things would turn into like rivers of fucking automatic weapon fire, So the first night we link up with the Army guys, and the first thing that they take us to is a mosque, right? So basically, being the EOD guy, you're just kind of like snap linked in at the end, right? So like, the call comes down, and you just kind of move up, like, hey, are you the guy with the problem? Are you the guy with the problem? Until eventually you get to the guy, and so the first thing we found, or that we got called in on, was a mosque, and this goes to like the bad guys, if whatever you want to call them, that the opposite team was using mosques, schools, hospitals, like all the typical shit you're not allowed to shoot at. That's
Mhm.
where all the weapons caches were, right? So we go in there, and there's some, it's dark, it's combat happening fucking everywhere. There's some small arms and some rockets and mortars and shit, RPGs laying around, just kind of scattered. But what was in there was like two Russian 250-pound bombs. And they were still in the Russians' shipping crates for those things are like round. It's like a round wood dunnage kind of thing. I don't know if that's so they can roll them or what, but there's they were originally wrapped in rugs, and so we cut the rugs open and bang, we got 500 pounds of bombs right here.
That's
So
like a movie thing, Like, what's in
yeah,
this? Cut it open. There's like bombs. All you need is a
yeah,
countdown timer and some wires sticking out of it. It'd be just like a bad movie.
yeah. I think they're called OFABs, right? But they're basically we call them Russian water heaters. It looks like a gray water heater with some jankety fins on it. They're not all cool and streamlined like our shit. Um, so we told the platoon commander or whoever he was, it's dark. You fucking basically no idea who you're talking to at this point. Just the guy who seems to be in charge. And like, hey, we can't move these things. He's like, yeah, just blow them up. I was like, okay, Roger that. So we kind of like rolled them closer together and set them with time fuse. And we're like, hey, look, this is going to go large. Right. These are basically 500-pound between the two of them. Right. So
Hmm.
now that's heavy case steel. So the actual explosive charge in there is probably a couple hundred pounds, but this shit's going to be large. So we kind of tell them that, it's like, okay, cool, no worries. We'll push down the street a little bit. So we kind of break the security posture down on the mosque, and we push further into the city down this street a little bit. And we end up parking our Humvee on the other side of a Bradley. So there's a Bradley. We put a Bradley in between us and the mosque, and like I'm pretty sure they told everybody in there to get down, but we're like, hey, look, this mosque is going to go away in approximately 2 minutes, right? So we're all sitting in the truck, and this is the first time like we've collectively blown anything that big, like in the truck, like this close. Um, it might have been the biggest time. It might have been the biggest thing I'd blown up this close. I can't think of anything in the first part of the war that I blew up that was this big. But so 2 minutes of time fuse while you're waiting for it to tick down takes like 10 hours when you're just fucking staring at it because you're like, oh man, don't let this be a misfire, because a lot of shit can
Oh
happen,
man, yeah, fuck
like,
that.
yeah, because that means we got to go back. We got to grab the crunchies. We got to get some O3s or whatever, the 11 Bravos. We got to get back in there. Who knows if the enemy backfilled it since then, because that was happening a ton, right? Like guys would clear a building, and then the enemy would just come right back through some mouse hole and be right behind him. That shit happened all the time. Um, because even with that many battalions, you couldn't maintain cleared space effectively.
Hmm.
So finally the time fuse ticks down and this thing cranks off, man. And it at night everything seems louder, and I forgot exactly why that is. It's an actual phenomenon, right? But this fucking thing goes large, and it felt like the back end of the Humvee kind of lifted up. And I can only imagine what the dudes in the Bradley thought. And like the chunks of fucking mosque and shit come raining down, and so that was pretty much our baptism into Fallujah. And we woke up the next morning, so we went firm for the night basically there. And the sun rose up the next morning, and like, oh shit, like, okay, so we're like in the middle of the industrial sector now. Um, the next thing we got called out to do, there was like a little weapons cache nearby that we just kind of blew up. That's kind of, I mean, there was hundreds of those that are basically like non-starter stories. So I'm just kind of stick to the really wild shit. So uh, they were still making their way south along the eastern edge of the town, and they were trying to finish the pincer move into the industrial sector.
Hmm.
So they're moving down there, and the Army's yeah. So they had come up to buildings that were wired with rockets, right? So once again, the bad guys think that we're going to come from the south. So what I mean by wire with rockets is they would take like the 57 millimeter rockets. It's like a rocket's like that big around. That's and for like a rocket pod or something like that for the Russians, and they would just run wires to it because that's how they get fired from the helicopter. The guy hits a button, goes down, shoots a wire.
Yeah.
And they would just put that thing on a rail and just point it out the window, right? So some guy in the building could just run through with a battery, firing rockets at people. So there was a building on the edge of town that 2-2 wanted to move around, had rockets sticking all out of it, and they're like, hey, you guys need to go in there and clear that building because we're going to start setting up around here. So in hindsight, like, it was completely obvious that we were moving into like an ambush position, but at the time, you got so much shit on your mind that you're not really thinking like this. So so we were on a road. That road moved through like a created serpentine. And so for folks that aren't tracking a serpentine, it's mounds of dirt that are offset that makes you drive through it in a slithering pattern, right? So you can't just come barreling straight through. So basically, as you're driving through, it slows you down, and they can take well-aimed shots at you, basically. So that should have keyed us off right away that we were fucked, but it didn't. So we kind of parked the EOD truck in the serpentine. The Army guys pushed forward past the building and just set up security. I can already see, like, looking down the road, that from the previous night, there's misfired 155s just laying on the ground. So when Artie's firing these things in, the United States accepts a 10% dud rate on our ordnance. So if we fire 100 artillery rounds in the city, there's going to be at least 10 of them just laying all over the fucking place. So I can already kind of see those. I'm like, okay, cool. Keep your mind on the prize. I move up into the building and I start take my backpack off and I start prepping these rockets. I'm just running blocks of C4 to them. I'm linking them up with a det cord, and I'm just going to blow the whole thing all at once. The rest of the team had found a couple more pieces of ordnance, so they were going to blow them a little bit off to the side. And so I get back to the truck to kind of check in with the team, and this whole thing is taking place in like a 50 square yard kind of little area. And that's when Gilchrist, or JT, notices that in the serpentine next to his driver's side door, there's like a blue 55-gallon barrel that he can just see the top of it's kind of buried. So he pulls out his flashlight and looks in there real quick, and there's like 3 or 4 artillery rounds in there, and it's an IED. So he like dives in there head first with his scissors and starts hacking that shit apart, right? Because what else are you gonna do?
That's crazy. Like, most people would not dive towards the IED and start fucking with, your EOD.
Yeah,
so you have to, right?
Yeah. Well, there's certain things that for us are like immediate action, right?
Yeah.
And I won't go into total detail about those, but like there's certain things that, like, if you see it, there's certain things you got to do because you're not gonna outrun this thing if it goes off. So he goes in there and gets to disarming those, and I move up because now we're gonna move everybody through the serpentine further into the city, and we're gonna blow the shit behind us. So I move up to the corner of the building because I've got the fuse igniter in my hand for the rockets, and JT's gonna blow that. He's gonna pull the fuse on that, and we're all gonna move together. They tell the Army guys, "Hey, push forward." So the lead Army security vehicle, the first vehicle is, we're on hardball, and off to the side's dirt. The first vehicle keeps on the hardball, drives forward down the road, and posts up. The second guy, for some unknown reason, like, doesn't follow that dude. He like wants to be different. He drives around this telephone pole onto the dirt and hits an anti-tank mine. So this thing was probably, I don't know, 10 feet from me, but it's on the other side of the building when it hits the anti-personnel mine. I'm sorry, the anti-tank mine. So I'm sitting there just kind of waiting. I've got my eyes on the EOD truck waiting for it to move, because as soon as it gets abreast with me, I'm going to pull mine and get back in the truck. So I'm watching them. I see the Army truck leave, and as soon as it disappears around the corner, like, the whole fucking world goes dark and dirty for me. Like, everything just fucking disappears. As like, I didn't lose consciousness, but I was enveloped by the detonation and the fucking dirt plume of this Humvee hitting a mine. So I could hear my teammates like yelling at me because they saw me disappear in the fucking smoke cloud. Yeah. And I could hear him like screaming for me, and like I can't remember if the doc was on his way over or not, but I fucking stopped him because I'm like, hey, I'm cool, man, it's all good. So we go around the corner, and the whole front end of this fucking truck is gone. Like, and that was the first time I'd seen the front end of a Humvee removed, which prepped me for my Afghanistan life, where it was like a routine thing. Luckily, the Army guys were all good. They're all alive, but those dudes were like, the turret gunner was like, "Fuck this, man! I didn't sign up for this kind of bullshit." He was like bitching and moaning. So we get all those guys kind of fucking squared away and get them moved further up. I blow that building up. It fucking collapses. We blow up the Serpentine IED, and they eventually get a wrecker up to move that shit and drag it out of the way.
Man, just
like
another day in Fallujah, right?
Yeah. So it was this was all like within days, and they all just kind of blur together down in the south. Like, because for the majority of the heavy fighting, I was in the southern part of the city. So kind of the next thing that happened that was kind of a trip was we got led. We somehow linked up with an Army SF guy within the next day or two, and basically, like, by himself. This is like another time that I understood that the soft guys were just on some other shit, right? Like they just operated on some other level that I was not aware of yet. So like this soft dude just shows up. He's got M4. He's got some Iraqis with him, and just like out of the blue, he's by himself. And I'm just like, this dude's got balls of steel, because there was like a whole Iraqi battalion that was supposed to be in on this with us that just never showed up. They just like, we're not going to go fight in Fallujah, right?
There was a group of Iraqis there, and some Marine advisors. No, I only know that because two of my officers were Iraqi Army advisors for that push. And the old CO of 1st ANGLICO, actually, he had his finger shut off in Fallujah. And when you would go into, so he's an ARTI guy, but he was an advisor then. If you would go into his office at ANGLICO, he had a SAPI plate that he was wearing, behind his desk with all the shit coming out, where it had shot his finger off and like went into a SAPI plate. And I'm like, that's a flex right there,
That's pretty badass.
Yeah.
So I'll just hit some of the weird shit, because basically we would just go building after building and blow up weapons caches. So this Green Beret leads us to these two buildings in the southern Fallujah area, like full of ordnance, right? So we're like, okay, cool. Basically we would give the guy or whoever called us up, we'd give him a swag, like, okay, we'd take a look at it. By this time we were pretty savvy with cache demolitions from having found them in the past. And we had a pretty quick routine going. So me and Gilchrist, JT, were like, the worker bees, and Doc would stay with Gunny and with whoever they were talking to, and we would just set everything up. Like, okay, cool, we can get this done in like, 10, 15 minutes, So we set up, the buildings were across the street from each other. So we set the first building up pretty quick. It had the less amount of shit in it. We took a spool of det cord and we stuck a screwdriver in it, right? Det cord, detonating cord. It's an explosive cord. Looks like Cat5 cable, only it's full of explosives. Just how you link explosives together. If you see like explosions going down a road, those are usually linked with det cord, So we set up the first building, and like during all this time, like combat is constantly happening, like all around you, right? Like, I don't even know big picture, like how these units kept they operated by phase line, right? So pushing from the north, they knew they were certain streets were certain phase lines and they were going to stop. Like, Michigan, Fran was a phase line, and there were lanes that the battalions were going to come down. So that's basically, I think, how they deconflicted the fires. So when we ran from one building to another building, and we started with the det cord, and then so now there's det cord running through the street, and we started to prep the second building, we heard the unmistakable sound of massive amounts of 7.62 rounds. See, for the folks out there at home, what the movies almost never get right is the sound of being shot at. Like, there's always these weird, like, pew, like stupid shit like that, but what it actually sounds like is a bullwhip. It sounds like a crack that's the bullet missing you, breaking the sound barrier on its way past. There's like a little sonic boom, and it's like the loudest like snap you've ever heard in your life, right? Or if you've been in the butts in the Marine Corps and you just haven't been shot at yet, like that sound above you, all those cracks at the 200-yard line or whatever, like that's 5.56 breaking the sound barrier.
Yeah.
So So we hear the unmistakable sound of us getting shot at with a shit ton of rounds outside, right? And then we hear the unmistakable sound of a fucking minigun. And I was like, bro, did we just get shot at with a minigun? Like, what the fuck? Because these terrorists, they have like 23. In hindsight, if those dudes would have known how to employ any of the weapon systems we destroyed, it would have taken us way longer to take that city. They had like 23 millimeter cannons. They had anti-tank missiles.
Mm-hmm.
It was just like they didn't know how to use the shit.
It was too disorganized. Yeah.
Yeah. So what happened is like we basically got strafed by a Huey. I don't know if the door gunner just fucking saw us running from building to building and just gave us the good news or what, but because I like peeked out the window and I saw like 2 Hueys go past and I'm like, dude, we just got shot at by a minigun. He's like, okay, we should probably get out of here then. I forgot exactly what he said, but that's how it went down. So we popped that radio back to try to. We didn't even fucking have radios. We just ran.
That's funny.
Blew those 2 fucking.
Did you guys have the? Did you guys do anything for the Marine Corps birthday while you were there? Because there's a lot of photos of like units during Fallujah, 10 November, having like a little cake cutting ceremony of like an MRE cake or something like that. Like, no, you guys didn't.
No.
No.
Yeah. I mean, we knew it was there, but it was, and we knew the significance of the fact, like, hey, we're about to do this on the Marine Corps' birthday. This is pretty cool. Which is funny now. So how long has it been? 2004. So 2021, 17 years. Jesus, I'm old.
Does that change? Do you think having gone to Fallujah changes the kind of vibe around the holiday for you? Because since it is like basically coincides with the Marine Corps birthday. Because some guys never kind of got over that, man. Some guys came back and were pretty messed up from their time in Fallujah, and it was always kind of like there was that famous photo. They called him the Marlboro Man.
Yeah.
You know that guy. I remember there was articles talking about like every year when this time of year he would just leave. Like his family said, he would just get on his motorcycle or something and leave for a couple weeks, and they just wouldn't hear from him. So there's guys that are messed up from being in that battle. So does that change how you look at the holiday?
Not really, because, and this is going to sound weird, but as far as combat goes for me, Fallujah wasn't even near it was a high watermark for a lot of people, but to me, Afghanistan in 2007 and the Helmand was way more kinetic than anything I ran into in Fallujah. So Fallujah, I know guys hit shitty fucking patches. Like I know guys ran into like the House of Death with like Sergeant Major Castle.
Mm-hmm.
And like we never ran into anything like that. Like we by the time we got called up, shit had mostly been cleared, so we would get shot at like pot shots and shit like that, but it was never like I was never pinned down in Fallujah, right? Like I was never.
You guys were just mopping up. You weren't the dude fucking kicking in the door going into the next house. Right.
Like not my team. My other guys were. So the guy I floated over with, Staff Sergeant Kevin Freiberger, he was who he was at the time. Later on, he became an officer, and he's probably retired now. But so he was attached to a 1-8, and they got called into a building. Now, so the recon guys that we floated over there with, they didn't even make it into Fallujah. We took our EOD guys back, and they went up and did a bunch of nonsense in like Al Asad and hit, right? Because it was funny when we got back to the boat. Because I'm floating over there, it's like, hey, we're the DRP guys. We're cooler than the other side of the fucking pillow. Yeah. If you look at us, make sure it's only for a couple seconds, or at least compliment me on my silkies, And then we got back on the boat with those dudes, and they were like, yeah, we got in a firefight this one night and hit. And I'm like, this one night? Like, what the fuck are you talking about?
Cool story, bro.
Cool story, bro. Like,
everybody likes to flex on each other, man. It's so funny. I love it.
Yeah. It's like I destroyed 6 buildings in one day, player. Like,
dude, was there a reaction after you guys blew up that mosque?
No,
because I would feel like if I was an Iraqi who was super religious, they blow up a mosque, I'd be like, "What the fuck?"
I'm sure it did nothing for the insurgency. I mean, I'm sure it did nothing good for the insurgency.
Yeah.
I mean,
what else could you have done though? I mean, you being the expert on the ground, the explosive guy on the ground. Was there really anything else you could have done? Could you have taken the bombs outside the mosque? Was there a way to save the mosque?
So later, once the real kinetic shit died down, which was really by the time December rolled around, the majority of the fighting was over.
Mm-hmm.
And it was there might have been a pocket or two of guys, right?
Yeah.
But by the time December rolled around, I'll kind of explain that part. So, so for Kevin, Kevin goes into this building, and there's something on the stairwell that they can't get. They can't get past. There's an ordinance. There's some. They get jammed up on the stairwell somehow, and they call up EOD, right? So Kevin shows up, and fuck man, I can't remember whose team he was on at this time, but anyway. Kevin starts making his way up the stairs, if I remember how this goes down correctly. And when he reaches the top of the stairs, a dude comes out and they get into like a gunfight in the fucking hallway. And it kind of bleeds into a room. So Kevin ends up getting shot. I'm trying to remember how many he took in the chest and how many he took in the arm. We started calling him Bullet Tooth Kevin because he got shot 7 times like Bullet Tooth Tony.
Oh, man.
So he goes up and starts duking it out with this guy in the hallway. Gets shot 7. I think he took 5 in the chest, which one of them crept around his plate and made it into his arm. So he transfers his gun from his right to his left or left to his right, whichever direction he went, and keeps engaging the dude. The dude chucks a fucking hand grenade at him, and he ends up like taking cover behind like a fucking couch or something, and ends up getting like fragged in the foot and the ass. Like eventually, he smokes the dude or the dude dies. I forgot exactly how that part went down. I think he killed him, but he goes to the hallway to kind of like wave to people that he's alive, and ends up getting shot twice again in the arm. So the theory is that the young devils downstairs, after hearing all that fucking commotion and seeing the movement, just shot Kevin again when he was sticking his arm out, because there was a pretty distinct difference between the wound up here in his chest from AK-47 fire and the 2 in and out puncture wounds in his fucking arm, right? Well, here goes the shitty thing with this. So he's up there. Everybody exfils the building because this is probably a week into the fighting, right? Mm-hmm. Where things are kind of dying down a little bit, but dudes are still running into pockets of hellacious fucking fighting, right? Because you start to get a little bit lax, and then you stumble into 5 dudes in a building, and it's on, right? So what we started doing is when anybody would take contact in the building, they would just pull back, and then we'd bring a tank up. We'd bring the D5 cats, the big armored bulldozers. If everything was too close to drop it with a bomb, they'd bring up a tank or the bulldozer and smash the building, and just call it a day. I mean, like, after the initial casualties of dudes fighting house to house, it was like, why the fuck are we doing this? As soon as we take contact, let's just go firm and destroy this thing in place. So they start talking about that in 1-8 to do this. I forgot who reminded them. I think it was like an AAV driver. Somebody was like, hey, where's the bomb tech at? Right. And because they were going to start like launching tow missiles into the building. And eventually they figured out like, oh yeah, he's still up there. So they back a track up to it, and they ran like an assault ladder up to the window. But then they had Kevin like crawl out of the window down the ladder like by himself.
Oh really?
Like, yeah.
That's crazy.
I forgot where the fuck I was going with this story.
God, I wish there was a video of that. We were just talking about how it was a crazy, like, some of the EOD techs were like getting into firefights, and they weren't all just like cleanup crew.
Yeah.
That's crazy, man. That's got to be. I mean, that's fucking. I mean, you're in a firefight in a hallway in a building. Like, that's it. Yeah. That's the worst it can get right there. Like, if you survive that.
Yeah, you don't got to be Stonewall Jackson to know you don't want to fight in a hallway in a building, right? Like,
yeah, no shit. Especially, man. And especially because those dudes are all drugged up. So you can shoot them a couple times, and they're all fucked up on drugs and stuff, so it's not going to affect them like you. Whereas, on our side, we don't have drugs. We have armor plates that kind of help out. But, fuck, man. Getting shot 7 times and then 2 more times. I could see if I was on the outside and I saw a hand, I would think they're throwing a grenade or something out. I could see why you could get shot in the hand like that. But that sucks. That's a shitty situation, but that's war, man.
And when you're an attachment, you don't really know the unit's SOPs. Like, they might have a running challenge and pass, like Budweiser or some bullshit. Yeah. And, nobody tells the EOD guy when he snap links in, like, hey, EOD guy, like, if the shit's the fan, like, numbers adding up to 11, Budweiser and Smurf, like, some kind of strange shit, Um, so the day that we found out that Kevin got shot, we were servicing a like car park that was close to the middle of the city because we just keep taking terrain. And inside this car park, actually, you know what? It was like a school and like the internal area of the school. It was like a walled in where there was a bunch of cars parked in there. And basically what it was they were making VBIEDs in there. So
Oh shit.
there was a couple of buses. One bus had been stripped for parts and they were using it to make the other bus whole. And inside that bus, they had found like one of our airdrop bombs, so like a Mark 80 series bomb that didn't go off. They had drug it and stuck it in the bus. And there was like hundreds of pounds of TNT that had been like sweated out of shit, stuck into bags, and they were going to load this entire bus with thousands of pounds of HME and turn it into a VBIED. One of the things I want to do is say you're right about the drugs. I found a lot of those, like within the weapons cache areas, you would find like little blister packs full of like amphetamine type shit. Like I'd ask the doc, like, hey dude, what is this shit? He'd be like, oh, that's muscle relaxer and amphetamines and shit.
Crazy shit, man.
Yeah, basically, that was how Fallujah went for me. Oh yeah, I got nominated for a Bronze Star in there. I forgot about that day. That's the thing. Like it's like some of the like days like shit like that happen. Like don't even register as like the hairiest days anymore. So how this one went down was we got called. We were still fucking around in the South with 1-8. 1-8 had got into a fight at a building, and we needed to come link up with them. Somewhere within the first week or week and a half, when the major fighting died down, we started doing what was called Task Force Cache. And what that was it would rotate between the EOD guys. And I think we got it a lot just because my TL was not the most popular guy with Master Guns Lasley. So we got stuck on Task Force Cache a lot, which I'm like, okay, cool, whatever. So what that was is we would go out with the engineers with like 3 7-tons. And every time a unit would be like, hey, we just went firm, come get all these fucking weapons, we would pull up and collect up like a 7-ton full of ordnance. And we would just keep doing that until the 7 tons were full. And then we would drive north of the city, stack it up all on the ground and blow it up. So we're doing one of those operations and we're moving from the south, sort of like into the middle of the city. And the convoy just keeps getting fucking hung up by IEDs. But so the lead vehicle will stop, be like, hey, there's another IED in the road. So me and JT would dismount. At this point, we never used the robot again that I can recall. It was all scissor work at this time. So once the house-to-house fighting started, like there wasn't any time to break the robot out. There wasn't any time to be like, hey, fellas, is this safe? Like, no, you just fucking broke out your scissors. You moved to the point of friction, assessed the IED, hacked it apart real quick, blew it up, and moved on. Like there wasn't any of this. So I was well versed in assault support EOD before I got to MARSOC. It was like, I got baptized by fire in Fallujah for assault support EOD. So we're moving north along this main MSR through the town. It was like a big north-south moving MSR. And there's, tracer fire going back and forth and bullshit. So we stop. Gilchrist and I would run out, cut apart the ID real quick. At this point, we weren't blown because we didn't have time. We just kind of threw them in the back of the truck. So there's like artillery shells bouncing around in the back of our Humvee. We come to this one point, and we're kind of blocked in, or we're canalized in, and there's an IED. There's 2 IEDs up ahead that the 7-ton driver has just magically seen. The dude was probably up there white knuckling it on fucking rippets and a positive mental attitude, right? So we link up with the dismounts that are right there, and we kind of take alleyways through the streets to get parallel with where the IEDs are. So we kind of satellite patrol up and get parallel with the IEDs. Like a young Lance Corporal is like, hey, look, there's one right at the corner of the building and there's one across the street. Well, it was kind of a joke between the staff sergeants, JT and Kevin, that like any shit detail that was to come up, the sergeants were going to get. Like, they just let us know that right off the bat. They're like, hey, new EOD guy, just understand when we tell somebody we're going to do something, we mean you're going to do something. So anytime you hear me and Kevin say we got it, that means you got it. Right. So, no harm, no foul, no hurt feelings. Right.
That's the way it works.
So it's the way it works. So it was a known thing that I was going to be the guy that ran across the road to get the far IED. So me and JT just kind of worked it out real quick. Like, okay, cool. I'll go get the one across the street, bring it back to this side, dump it next to yours. We'll bip them right there, blow in place, BIP, and get on with our lives, right? Well, you can hear rounds cracking. So I've been carrying this HC smoke grenade for a couple days now, and I'm like, you know what? Why the fuck am I just gonna run out in the middle of this street? Like, let me just chuck this fucking smoke grenade out there. We'll let it billow up a little bit, then I'll handle my business. This is like 8 o'clock in the morning, and we learned about something called an inversion layer in EOD school because it can affect reflective pressure with blast. It's where the ground level air has become hot because the sun's hitting the ground and warming it up, but the air higher up is still cold. So as the air rises, it hits that colder layer and it just kind of keeps shit on the ground. So you can see it in Camp Pendleton when you just, got like a morning mist layer.
Yeah.
That's an inversion layer. So this is how I learned science in Fallujah. So I chucked this fucking smoke grenade out there. It rolls out into the street, pops. Basically, all it does is alert the enemy that my dumbass is about to run through this fucking street. So the smoke, the smoke gets up to about hip level and then just runs down the street, like in a nice, beautiful white cloud that just goes down the street. So I look at JT and I'm just like, all right, man. Well, we didn't get all dressed up or nothing, So I go sprinting across, and fucking bullets are cracking. I cut this artillery round. It's just wired in. It probably goes to a command wire or something like that. Hopefully that guy's dead. Who the fuck knows? Hump this artillery round back over to his side of the street, dump it off next to him. He's already got his wire cut, and he plops a block of C4 down on him, and we peel around the corner. Well, we're about to detonate 2 artillery shells, around the corner, right? So these things go off and end up blowing like the front half of the building off. So I end up laying over a bunch of young O3s as like debris and shit comes fucking raining down and basically clears that fucking area. So that was like part of the Bronze Star write-up. But that, once again, that was just like one day. The other part of it was we linked up with this other Army SF guy and went on some fucking walk through the city. First of all, this guy just shows up in a Humvee by himself. He's got a 50 cal and like a 240 in the turret, and there's like an Iraqi driving it. He's like, hey, you get the EOD guys? We're like, yeah. He's like, okay, cool, come with me. We're like, okay, fuck, here we go. So we go following this guy. He gets out. He's like, well, come on, I'll take you where all this shit is, and just starts walking off into the industrial sector. And I'm like, he said his call sign was Leopard Mike. I'm like, oh, okay, cool. Yeah, the dude's just walking, and his Iraqi driver, his eyes are like this fucking big, man.
Yeah,
so
what
obviously this guy is always like this. So we're weaving our way through busted buildings and fucked up shit, and he's kind of telling us as we're walking, and it's just me, him. I can't remember if it was just Davis with me or if it was it was Davis and JT. So it was just the 4 of us, right? He's like, hey, last night we got into it with some dudes here. We killed about 20 of them just right around the corner over here. I was like, okay, cool, man. Like, well, hopefully got them all, like as we're walking over. And he's like, oh, man, here's a trippy thing. So mortuary affairs could not get into that city for a couple weeks. So there was literally dead bodies everywhere. Like we started giving them names because we were until we got on Task Force Cache, we were just kind of responsible for a certain sector. And so like we just started naming the dead bodies. Like there was this dude they got smoked on like the first night, and like a couple nights after, some cats or dogs had come across and ate homeboy's face off. Yeah. So we referred to him as Skeletor. Like, oh yeah, we're gonna pass by Skeletor on the way to whatnot. There was another dude that looked like his lower half took like a 50 cal hit because like it blew his whole ass off. So the assless man was over there. This other dude we called Xylophone Boy because something had like blown half of his side off, so we could see all of his ribs. So like like a
some real
xylophone.
fucked up stuff. So real quick for the mortuary affairs stuff, actually, one of the first episodes, my buddy Michael Hanthorne, who I went to high school with and everything, was part of the mortuary affairs for Fallujah.
Okay.
And he talks about it, and I think it probably wasn't that they hadn't gone in, because they were right. He was saying how they were like 2 houses behind the ones being cleared, pulling shit out. But in some spots, there were probably not enough people, because he said his team pulled like 700 bodies out, or maybe it was the entire mortuary affairs had like 700 bodies recorded at the potato farm or potato factory is what it was called, like right outside of Fallujah. And I was going to mention that anyway, like that if you hadn't heard that episode, you'd probably find it it's an audio only one, but he was a Motor T truck driver, and they all got they asked for volunteers, but then I think they all got voluntold in the end. He volunteered, but they all ended up going anyways. And they got pulled up, like a bunch of CLB people just got pulled up and were like, hey, your guys' mortuary affairs now, going into Fallujah and cleaning up dead insurgents. And I was like, dude.
I love hearing stories from different perspectives. Like hearing Galvin talk about how MARSOC started on the East Coast, So yeah, I'll check it out. Where's I going with that? Oh, so as we're walking, we walk through an area where I guess these 20 dead dudes they smoked the other night used to be, because there's like body parts everywhere.
Yeah.
And I stepped over what I thought was a set of dentures, right? Which I thought was weird. I'm like, okay, I don't know who the fuck lost their dentures out here, but it was actually just like this top part of like somebody's fucking head, and I'm just like, oh, that's a bummer. So while we're doing this, like we get engaged by a fucking sniper, like across this long ass, like dirt open area. Right. Mm-hmm. So we're just walking along and crack, that fucking bullet goes through us. I say a sniper because that guy said a sniper. Basically, so we dive down behind some fucking rubble and basically scurry in between rubble piles until we get out of this fucking kill zone. And as we get around the kill zone, this dude Leopard Mike just starts strolling again, right? And like, hey man, we gotta like radio that in or anything. He's like, he either said it was a Syrian or a Chechen. He's like, there's some Syrian sniper we're trying to kill out here. I'm just like, okay, cool, man, whatever. I'm not sure if I had a point to that story either. So basically,
it's just a lot of crazy shit happening in Fallujah.
It was just like, it was wild thing after fucking wild thing. So I have to make sure I hit all the high watermark crazy shit in Fallujah. So yeah, that was pretty much it, man.
Have you ever read Being West's book? It's called No True Glory.
I started to, and I've got it laying around here somewhere. I haven't read all of it, no.
Yeah, I haven't read it in a couple of years, but I remember it being a pretty good one. Yeah, it's just such an interesting battle, man. And it's like one of those points of pride for guys that were there, and the guys that didn't get to go were like, fuck. Like, you're either in that like group, like I'm a Fallujah vet, or I'm not, like kind of deals. It's one of those things where people are like, damn, man, that would have been like a weird, like super shitty situation, obviously. But at the same time, as most fucking like grimy, hardcore military action that you could probably ever wish for. You know what I'm saying?
Well, I guess one last one on, because it'll just be continual stories of
tell the stories, man.
Weird fucking days.
Tell the stories.
So we got called up to this one building, and one of the guys was like, "Hey, there's a tripwire in the door." And it was kind of funny because my call sign in my Bravo company tour was Tripwire. But so I roll up to the door, and I find the tripwire, and I kind of like, here was the shitty thing is you never knew if any of these buildings around you had been man, like peanut butter and jealous. You never knew if these fucking, I need to quit my job, if these buildings around you like had people in them, man. So it was always a nerve-wracking experience from that perspective, because like good or bad, Davis didn't want us in any part of like going into buildings after Kevin got shot, right? which is I guess it's understandable at the time. Like,
Yeah.
it was a major point of contention on the team at the time, because I'm like, me personally, as an 03, I would rather clear a danger area physically with my face, or some other weapon system to ensure there's no enemy there, than to just fucking hope they're not. And that was kind of his thing, was like, as long as I don't pretend they're there, they're not going to be there, kind of thing. And it turned out, for us at least, that they never were, but it was more of a lucky thing than a tactical thing, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I come creeping up to this building, and it's kind of a doorway going into a kitchen, and I can see like a hole in the wall where they blasted something into the kitchen, right? Like all the windows and shit are blown out. And so I kind of clear with my rifle, like make sure, because they haven't cleared past the fucking trip line. So I assess the tripwire. You got two different types of tripwires. You have taut tripwires and slack tripwires, right? And there's different things you do for each one. So I kind of follow the wire out, and I'm like, it's going to what initially they thought was like a claymore. They thought it was like a claymore. It was attached to, but for some reason I just recognized this thing. It was like a Russian smoke container. So it was like it was sort of claymore shaped, but it was a smoke generator. I don't know. They knew what it was or what, but so I just disarmed that fucking thing real quick, and I move into the kitchen. And as soon as I get into the kitchen, like the walls are covered in blood, the fucking floor is covered in blood, and the kitchen is just fucking wrecked. And there's a hole in the back wall, and I'm like, what the fuck is going on in here, man? So I kind of I move up to the hole in the wall, and JT comes up behind me and goes with some of the O3s up the stairs. I step out into the backyard, and there's like a pelvis in the backyard, and like half a leg, and like some other chunks and parts and pieces of people. God. So I asked one of the dudes, I was like, hey man, what the fuck went on here? He's like, oh, we were taking fire from this thing, so we brought the tank up and fired the main gun in here, and that's what took homeboy out. So like, there was a dude in that kitchen giving him the business, and they brought the tank up and just blasted him, and it splattered his ass all over the kitchen, out the back of the building.
That's so crazy, man. That's like legit fighting, like toe-to-toe fighting with the enemy. And there was no question here that these were like bad guys. There's some questions sometimes, like, man, did we kill a dude that, wasn't a bad guy in this strike or whatever? You see it on the news and shit like that. But for that battle, that was legit all bad guys. And it was that's just crazy, man.
If I had to say that there was anything that was like no, I still say the helmet in 2007 was worse, but at least then, it was like you said, like, hey, this is a designated battle zone. All the women and children I didn't see any women and children in Fallujah until like January, when we let them back in. Like, it was legitimately a ghost town besides us and them. It was like a Call of Duty level. It was like, hey, like, this is the arena.
Yeah.
And when you're in this arena, like, it's all good. It's just use whatever works.
Game on. I had a buddy who I think he was with 2-8, and he was in Ramadi at the same time that this was going on.
Yeah.
And it's a kind of undercovered story that when Fallujah was surrounded, they're like, hey, if you stay, you're a bad guy. If you leave, then you're not a bad guy. Well, they took that opportunity for a lot of the bad guys to leave, and they migrated over to Ramadi. So at the same time that this whole Fallujah, push is going on, all the dudes in Ramadi are now getting like increased attacks there, and that's when, after Fallujah, Ramadi turned into the next like real shithole. Like it was already, but the next following years, the rest of 04, 05, 06 was like the key years that like Ramadi and that surrounding whole area was pretty rough. Yeah, man. Fuck, yeah, crazy stuff.
Yeah, it was a trip, man.
Looking back, like, do you think you were prepared for something like that after EOD school? Should there have been? Was there anything that could have prepared you for something like that, or is that something, one of those things like you just have to get into it and do it?
In hindsight, having been in curriculum development for guys, later on in my life, you could definitely prepare an EOD team to, And we did later on in life, like it was, I mean, this is 2004 for fuck's sake. I mean, the War on Terror was barely 3 years old.
For
I mean,
sure.
it was, OIF-1, you know, talking about that last episode for me was kind of a cakewalk. Like we didn't really hit anything. So there were no SOPs built for us. There was no, immediate action, assault support drills weren't in. So like, hey, if you see this, you do this. If you see this, you do this. Kind of shit. There wasn't any sort of training on how to deal with on-scene commanders. Because like you talked about, we talked about last time. It mystifies me sometimes when I stop and think how young I was when I did this shit. So this is 2004. I was a sergeant, and I was 26 years old, or I might have been 25, because I'm a June guy, so I'm born. I usually turn, so I don't have to do the math and figure it out. But I was either 25 years old or 26 years old, man. So it was like, and I was the only guy on my team with combat experience. Like nobody else had done shit, right? And Davis, terrific person. That it just is what it is. But like that dude was an early EOD alcoholic, right? So like EOD, everyone's drunk, right? I heard Fred Galvin say
the rumor, right?
Yeah, say what did he say? He said divorce recon instead of force
is that
recon.
what he said?
Yeah, it's divorce recon.
That's funny.
Well, or EOD, everybody's divorced. But anyway, long story short, so like Davis was drying out from fucking being an alcoholic during this time, man. Like, so he would do weird shit. Like we went firm in this building with either 3-1 or 1-3. They had machine gunners on the roof, and it was kind of close to their CP. So they were like, "Hey guys, EOD guys, we got this building. Don't sweat it. Just you're not off." We had no fire watch responsibilities at the time.
Yeah.
Like, usually we would link up with whoever we linked up with and be like, "Hey, put us on your watch roster. We got extra bodies. So we're just down in this room in this building that we were kind of rotating through, right? So we kind of hunker down for the night. Everything's blacked out once the sun goes down, and so I'm sleeping on this Iraqi person's couch. We had earlier fired up the TV and got like satellite reception again. Nice. And we were like boiling water. It was kind of a chill little spot to hang out, right?
You're making it a little home for yourself.
Yeah, you got to, right? So I'm racked out on this couch, and like Davis all of a sudden like sits bolt upright and screams, "JT, shoot him in the head or shoot him in the face. They're coming through the door." So I after Kevin got shot, I took his M4 because I was still running around with my fucking dad's M16A2 service rifle, and like there was no way to get that M4 back to recon because they were up at hit or something like that.
Yeah.
And I'm like, I've never been a huge stickler for the rules anyway, so I'm like, well, okay, cool. This M4 is better than my M16. I'm just gonna carry this fucking thing. So I had an M4 with a Surefire light on it.
Everybody's probably looking at him like, how did he get that? How did you get that?
Yeah, exactly. I just took it. And as EOD guys, we had all kinds of crazy shit. There was all kinds of like MP5s that we found and all kind of weapon systems, right? So I sit up and I fucking flashlight the door, and I realize the door is closed. I look over at JT, who's like now has like an eyeball cracked open, like what the fuck is this guy talking about? And then I look over at the doc, who's also like now awake, looking in the bed, and Davis just kind of like sits back down and goes back to sleep and like snuggles up like nothing fucking happened. And I'm like, bro, am I fucking dreaming right now? Did that really just happen?
Well, you get into those mindsets of like, I don't know, whatever you're doing is so ingrained into you, and you're doing. My team told me one day, they're like, "Dude, are you okay?" Like when I was in Afghanistan as an advisor in 13, I'm like, "Yeah, why? What's up?" They're like, "You were like doing a call for fire or talking to aircraft in your sleep last night, like yelling." I was like, "Really?" They're like, "Yeah, we just want to make sure like everything's good." I'm like, "No, everything's good. Like I'm good." Like I didn't even know I did it. I didn't remember it, but I'm like, okay. But I think it's coming from that severe like fucking. You're on it. You're on the game. You're constantly. It's a high stress job. We have high stress jobs, so when you're constantly thinking about it, I think it's hard for your brain to like switch off for a little bit and kind of reset.
I think it's probably during this time, it'll bleed into into the conversation when we eventually get to me being in MARSOC, I guess. But like, it was during this time that I developed a steady and burning dislike for the HQ, right? like I kind of already couldn't stand the fucking HQ from being in 3-7, and like it didn't get much better here. And I just like point a couple of these out, right? And so the MSSG 31, like Sergeant Major, came out with us one day, and on one of our task force cache missions, and this dude, once again, man, typical Sergeant Major, talked a pretty big fucking game, and we were at that place where the bus bomb was, and we got the young engineers out there, and we're just doing like a chain where we're just passing ordnance, like like we used to call it, setting up the hooyah. You set up a chain of dudes and you just start seabag moving ordnance from wherever it is. There's an EOD guy in the pile making sure everything's safe, and it gets moved up to the 7-ton, right? Well, somebody hands Big Smudge like an 82 millimeter mortar, doesn't even have a fucking fuse in it. And like he looks at it like it's pure kryptonite, like passes it off to somebody else, and then gets in the fucking truck and like never returns again, right? There was one evening we got called to this corner, and what had happened was like an insurgent had got smoked like early on in the fighting, and had just been on this corner rotting for 3, 4, 5, 6 weeks at this point. I forgot when I eventually got to him, and of course Boot Anderson has to go in and get this shit. So I disarmed like an improvised landmine on the way in, or some shit that was in place there, and there's like a rocket in. There's just all kinds of weird shit. I don't know what the guy was doing crawling into this fucking bush, but what's left of his body, which is now like a flat pancake at this time, has like a chest
into the ground.
Yeah, exactly. It turns into like this weird soupy shit. Like it can be all of us one day. But I get this chest rig off of him. I cut it off, and it's got a camcorder stuck in one of the pockets, right? So we want to get that over to the intel guys.
For sure.
And so we end up driving back to that. I think it was that little hooch that we were staying in with the weird nightmare scenario that went down. With that thing hanging off the rearview mirror of the Humvee outside the truck, because it fucking just reeked of dead flesh, right?
Oh God.
So sometime shortly after that, like we go back to Camp Fallujah to refit. So we would be in the city for 5-6 days. We'd go back to Camp Fallujah for like 2 days, back in the city for 5-6 days, back to Camp Fallujah for like 2-3 days. And that was kind of the rotation the entire time. So, Davis would have to check in with the MSSG 31 talk back on Fallujah. I don't know what the fuck for. Like, it wasn't like we ever worked with these people, or they had like no, that I could tell, they had no function in our day-to-day lives, right?
Yeah.
And these were all people I recognized from the HQ element as I would stroll in there. So the first couple times I would walk in there with him, and once I got to EOD, I figured I had a little bit more leeway than normal folks. So I went on tactical tailor and ordered my own shit, right? Like I was tired of the Marine Corps bullshit, right? Because I had better stuff in security forces, invaded Iraq in 2003 with the standard Marine Corps bullshit. And then since I knew I was going back, I was like, okay, I got to wear this stupid interceptor vest. And normally people just bolt their shit directly onto that thing.
Mm-hmm.
And I was never a huge fan of that, just because the way it opened, it was just, I don't know, I didn't dig it.
Yeah, I had the flaps in the front for those that don't
yeah. Know. So I got like a tactical tailor chest rig, and so I was rocking some fairly non-standard shit. So I would walk into the HQ and smelling like a dead body I just crawled through. Like I haven't really slept in 2 or 3 days, and so in there it'd be like December. They got like Christmas lights. It smells like warm hot chocolate and hot coffee in this motherfucker. And like as soon as I walk in there, all of these fobbits like look at me like I just pissed directly on the floor, because I smell like death, and I look like warm dog shit, because I haven't shaved in a couple of days, and I'm covered in soot and dirt from like crawling through weapons caches. And it was probably the beginning stages of my PTSD that I was just like I was like burning with motherfucking fury. I told Gunny Davis, I was like, hey dude, like it wasn't dude, it was like, hey Gunny, I was like, hey Gunny, like I can't go into that fucking building ever again, because I'm just gonna click off safe in this motherfucker, right? Like
it's the it's straight out of the scene from Saving Private Ryan, where he comes in at the very beginning on the beach, and he's coming to get his orders for his next mission, and everybody's got like those fat sandwiches and hot coffee and all that shit, and he's like, man, we're out here fucking starving and stuff.
Yeah, and his hands are shaking because he just lost dudes taking out 88 millimeter guns and shit. Like,
everybody hates hire, man. That's just the way it is. And when you're like a specialized dude and you know what you need to do, like you're like, this is what I need to do. This is the most effective way to do this. And other people hinder that, or other people like, you know, aren't happy that you're not the classic Marine with starch camis and fucking, you know, whatever. You're just trying to do your fucking job. It gets you very disgruntled because you're like, dude, just let me do my job, man. Like, the war is different for us. You're over here getting all these care packages that people send that are just through some charity organization. All that shit all the good stuff gets filtered out by the headquarters people at the major base, like at Al-Assad. Yeah. And then they ship it out to the FOBs, and then all the headquarters people there, and then they get shipped out. You know, it's funny. All that stuff, it gets progressively worse the farther you go out. However, I'm sure you'll agree with this, I wouldn't have it any other way, though.
Nah.
You want to be on that because you want to feel like you earned it. You know, I want to come back and be like, I earned my war stories or whatever. I earned, this was like, it was legit. You know what I'm saying? Like, everybody's got their role in the war, but it sucks when you come in and you see, like, I remember going to Leatherneck from Fob Marja. You know, we didn't have running water at Fob Marja or anything like that. Like, it was like water bottles. We would brush our teeth on a sink that was like a fucking weird mirror thing with a cart or a piece of wood with a hole cut in it. That was just, you're spitting into the ground. And I remember going to Leatherneck after being there for like 4 or 5 months, and just, I could smell shampoo like 100 yards away. Like, females on the camp, if the wind was blowing towards me, I could smell their shampoo from like 100 yards away. And people were like complaining about the coffee. And like, it was like you were talking about at Al-Assad, you know, how it was like, is this the war? Like, what is going on here? It's like there's like a steakhouse over there, you know, like, dude, what's going on? And
Leatherneck and Bastion was out of control.
The Blue, like, I think it was called the Blue.
It was called the Blue.
The steakhouse. I was like, this is a steakhouse.
Yeah, it was called the Blue. There were several restaurants over there. Yeah. So to kind of wrap up Fallujah, you know, it kind of died down. We did some operations with recon in the south because, like you said, the bad guys squirted from Fallujah to Ramadi and south to this area called Zidon. So January type time frame, we helped recon kind of clear up down there, and you know, there was a couple of hairy things, but it wasn't anything crazy. We helped, I forgot what unit it was, but a unit ripped in, and we helped them set up the election site like in January at the concrete factory that was north of Fallujah, and that was pretty much like the last big hurrah that we had. As far as like actual operations, and then we got put like on talk watch, our team, I think at the end of February, because we were going to go home. Like, the 31st ME was going to rip out. Like, we were there for like, all in all, it was like 9 months. I was supposed to be on Okinawa for a year. In actuality, I was only on Okinawa for 3 months. I was on the boat for 2 months, and I was in Fallujah proper for like 7 straight months. And so it was pretty hilarious because, like, the long story short with that Bronze Star is, so if folks aren't really tracking how awards in the Marine Corps work, so you get written up at your local level, right? So your team leader, your team chief, whoever, you know, writes up the award, and then it goes into like what's nowadays is called the IAPS, which is the something award processing system. You know, it almost like goes through votes, right?
Yeah.
So for, you know, storming through all these fucking bunches of fire and disarming shit with my bare hands. And this is 2004, where like nobody really knows what IEDs do or what havoc they're going to wreak on us for the next, you know, 16 years.
Yeah. TTPs haven't been established. Yeah.
Yeah. Like it doesn't really, like, the fact that you disarmed, you know, like, I don't know, 100 IEDs by hand doesn't really resonate with the brass at the time, right? So I get a glowing fitness report from my dude on MSSG 31. I actually got an F for courage, and for those of y'all don't know, that's good. Like A is bad, F is good. F is actually so good that they have to write some other shit in there, right? So he was like, "Hey, Sergeant Anderson's, balls clanks when he walks, whatever is the fucking write up." And that dude, who I never actually even saw, he would just hear about me. Is a dude. He's a first lieutenant, a dude named Horton. Like he would just get. He was my reporting senior, and never saw the dude. Right? He would just take what Gunny Davis said. So good on Gunny Davis. When the disagreements I had with him at the time, he was a pretty honest dude. So they write up this Bronze Star with a V, and it gets approved with enthusiasm, like all the way up through the chain of command, right? So the MSSG 31 Lieutenant Colonel signs it off, the MU Colonel signs it off. It gets to a dude named General Sattler, and I forgot exactly what Sattler's billet was at the time. Like, I don't know if he was the meth commander or some shit, but it gets up to him, and with one like little fucking pen stroke, he drops it to a comm with a V.
Yeah, that's what happens.
And I'm like, what in the fuck? And floating here, so here's another one, floating back on the boat. Because really, like, Aaron and I kind of talked about this on our last episode. Like, I want the guys to come behind me. Like, I feel like I was kind of dealt a little disservice because I got Vietnam veterans in my family who did not explain to me. I said I would have still joined, right? I probably wouldn't have gone as far as I did if I would have heard their stories. But, like, I'm sure their stories are 100% like our stories, right? Because Vietnam and Afghanistan is basically the same fucking war, right? It's like some strange mirror image of each other when you start breaking it down.
Yeah.
Like, to include the poppy fields and everything. So, like, just the level of, I know where I was going with this. Like, I don't want it to seem like I'm ever like shitting on the fucking Marine Corps, because I think I get accused of that. But it just is what it is, man. It's like,
well, the award system is kind of fucked up, I mean, when I got out, it was pretty fucked up, and I saw guys get shafted out of awards throughout the years. I got an award where I was like, dude, I got it just because I was a staff NCO, and I just did my job. And I'm like, this is stupid. Like, I don't even want this, and whereas there's guys that didn't get awards and did a shit ton of work, and did a lot of stuff, or they'd give them like some bullshit CERCOM, certificate of commendation or something like that. I talked about it in some of the early episodes of the podcast. I had this, a scout on my team for my deployment in 3-6. He came to us late, so he was like my FATIDS operator. He was like my guy working in the command center with me. And then when we got to Afghanistan with 3-6, they gave every company their own AO, including Weapons Company had their own AO. And then we actually had Charlie 1-6 attached to us, who had their own AO, and then Alpha 1-9 was attached to us, and they had their own AO. And so we just didn't have enough 0861 guys, so I couldn't keep them in the COC. I was like, dude, let's send them out to Weapons Company. They're out in Sistani, which is west of Marja, and is a pretty shitty area. Yeah. And they need a scout out there. And he, all the time we'd get reports back. So-and-so's in contact. Direction and distance to the contact is this. And I'd be the guy in the COC plotting it on a map. Here's where they're at. I'm plotting it here. Hey, ISRS at, look there. And it was never right. It was always like this is when the infantry guys were sending it to us. It was never correct. It'd always be a little off, or it'd be like way off. Heat of the moment, I get it. Yep. And one day we're sitting here, and you don't get like so-and-so like names in contact. You get a call sign is in contact. Mm-hmm. And one day, like, hey, call sign, whatever is in contact, direction and distance, blah, blah, blah. So I do my thing. I'm on the map, plotting it out, get a grid. We had a Reaper on station, give it to the S2 guys. They put it on, and it was like spot on. You got two dudes firing PKMs. One has an RPG. No, excuse me, a saw. The dude had a saw. They had a captured saw from a British. They had captured at some point. I guess there was a British like armory vehicle that got captured during a convoy or something like that. So they had a saw in it and RPGs and shit. And we start tracking these dudes, end up smoking one of them, or smoking. There was 2 motorcycles. We could only track one of them. I end up smoking one of the bikes. I think we got 2 guys off that one. And I was like, dude, I bet that was Lamel. You know, I was like, I bet that was him out there because that was like spot on. And I seen him a couple days later. He was at Fob Marsh. I was like, dude, is that you? And he's like, yeah. I was like, do you have the Vector Dagger, the laser rangefinder, and the GPS attachment?
Yep.
I was like, is that how you got the location? He's like, nah. He's like, no, Sergeant, I didn't bring it out or I forgot it or something like that. He's like, we started taking contact and I'm down behind a dirt berm and I just pop up and pull my compass out and shot a direction with the compass and did a range estimation. And I was like, fuck yeah, dude. And I told my captain, I'm like, dude, we got to get, you know, he's got to get written up for an award for that. Like, you know, that's legit, you know? And he's like, well, we can't do it because he's with the weapons company now. So the weapons company guys need to take care of it and all that. And I'm like, all right. No one writes him up for an award, ends the deployment, doesn't get even a fucking SIRCOM, anything. And then we're doing 3/6's award ceremony after the deployment. And a guy gets an award. And part of the write-up is what fucking Lamel did during that patrol. They added his actions to this guy's award for a Navy comm with a V. Because he was like the squad leader or something like that. And I'm like, dude, that's so... And that's when I was like, this is fucking bullshit. And I was like, and I told Lamel, I was like, man... I was like, I don't care if anyone else tells you, like, you deserve something for that. Because that was badass. I was like, that's fucking... You know, you did your job, like, when it needed to be done. And we got results from it, you know? So, the award system's so fucked up, you know?
So... And what really drove it home was that Sergeant Major with the fucking mortar kryptonite and the MSSG 31 XO, who went on a convoy or two, like ended up getting Bronze Stars, no Vs, right? Like just like the participation award Bronze Star. We're floating back on the Essex, and there's an award ceremony on the well deck for the battalion landing team for 1-3. And so we go down there as the EOD guys because, you know, we floated there with them and we worked with them in the city, like, so we knew these guys. And so we're just standing in the formation. And there's 2 guys that are going to get awards. One's a comm kid and the other's a kid from the state platoon with 1-3, right? So the snipers. And I recognize this guy because we ran into him numerous times in the city, right? And skinny wiry kid, right? Like probably came from a farm somewhere, and a lot of times when I saw him, for whatever reason, he had like a Mossberg in the city, right? So he was using like a shotgun. I don't know if it's because he was carrying the M40 and just carried a shotgun too, who knows. So the first kid gets his award read, and I kind of knew who he was too, like one of the comm kids, you know, who spent his time, you know, holding down Camp Fallujah. And it was the standard bullshit, right? Like, hey, Corporal so-and-so kept track of, you know, 15 fucking radios and a pile of batteries and like a shit ton of antennas. You know, the normal shit where you get awarded for doing your job, right? So he gets a Navy comm, right, with a Navy Commendation Medal, Navy Marine Corps Commendation Medal. So then the awards formation bumps over to this fucking wiry ass sniper. And so they read off this kid's award goes down something like this. His team takes contact in this fucking building and they get a couple wounded guys. This kid proceeds, you know, kid, he's probably my age at the time, whatever, to make entry with his fucking shotgun and dust off 4 or 5 fucking insurgents and then like firemen's carry his fucking dudes out. Like, so he went in there and handled business, you know, with the buckshot and then saved fucking wounded Marines. And he got a comm with a V. And I'm like,
this is the first. The V is supposed to distinguish that, but it's like, come on, man. Like,
yeah, I'm like, because in OIF 1, nobody got awarded for shit, and I was like, that's okay, whatever, no big deal. I mean, it was like I personally didn't think we ran into anything in our lane, so it made sense to me that hey, we all got combat action ribbons. Cool, man. That's about the gist of it, right?
Yeah, you always expect like not knowing like pre-combat, I guess, or whatever. You expect awards to be given for that above and beyond, not for like the regular like doing your job kind of deal. And I think, although we hate on the Marine Corps for giving out awards for shit that people probably shouldn't get in awards, especially on the MLG side.
Yeah.
In the Army though, it's way worse. Everybody,
Oh, hell yeah.
Everybody like E6 and above gets a Bronze Star for deployment. Like, it's very watered down. The whole award system's fucked up. I think we've got too many. Now we want to have fucking all these ribbons for everything. Everybody's ribbon chasing, like I personally don't think officers should get awards, personal awards at least, unless it's like the Medal of Honor. That might be the exception, because I think there are officers that make bad decisions in order to get awards sometimes. They like, hey, let's go get into a fight. Kind of mentality, because they want to go prove themselves, like, I'm an infantry officer, I'm a whatever. And I think that can end up and I think over the years, I'm sure there's people out there that can attest to this, that people have been killed because of stupid decisions by guys that are just trying to get an award, or like say they got into the fight. So I think we should take away that incentive. And, but that's like one of my many ideas, I guess, about
it's all hindsight now, right? Like,
yeah, dude. Yeah.
So I guess I can kind of wrap up, the war just or Phantom Fury just kind of ended, and we got back on the boat. We floated home, stopped in Thailand, just kind of drank beers and chilled out for a little bit. Got back to Okinawa, and I PCS to MWSS 373 in Miramar.
What's that? What's that like coming out of a war zone and getting back on ship? Because I've said before on the podcast how, our sailors, a lot of the sailors, at first they didn't like us, we didn't like them getting on ship. Like, they weren't very happy. There were Marines on there. There was a fight on our ship because there was a kid that got killed, and an Osprey went into the ocean, and one of the crew chiefs died. And we were having the memorial ceremony on the flight deck, and we could hear some like sailors like joking and smoking fucking on the catwalk right below the flight deck. Like, there was like a fight, and I was like, I bet these fucking people wouldn't care if we came back like all fucked up from combat. It's like, oh shit, the Marines are back. Now the chow lines are long again. What was like the attitude when you guys came back on ship?
I will say this is that it was subdued, because 1-3 lost a fucking ton of dudes. Like in one CH-53 crash near the election time, 1-3 lost like 35 guys in 153. Like they were going up to support another election site, and this was January, and we were all going to leave sort of February-ish type time frame to go back to Kuwait. And so they were short timers like we were, and they lost like 35 dudes on one CH-53 crash, and they'd taken a bunch of casualties in the city itself. I mean, I want to say that was 3rd Marines' first trip into combat. Like the lava dogs out there in Hawaii had not been in the shit before, right? Like there's another unit out there, I think it was like 1-1 that hadn't made it into the war for a hot minute, and they were like referred to as all fun 1-1, like 2-7 for us, and got stuck in Okinawa for a year. But 1-3 got beat up pretty bad, and I think the Navy. So they had done, I think they did tsunami response to the Philippines, or maybe the Philippines or Thailand or something like that, while we were in the city. But for the rest of those times, they were just cutting gator squares, right? So they were just circling the ocean, or circling the Persian Gulf, But they get television on the boat. You get AFN, you get Fox News, you get whatever. So I think it was kind of known by the people on the boat, like, floating over there. It is what it is. They're like, hey, get the fuck out of line. If it's Navy, it's Navy hours. You can't eat.
God, fucking Navy hours.
But when everybody else got back on there, I think they realized that they were dealing with like dudes that just spent like months murdering people face to face. And, it's all fun and games until you bump into that dude who just saw too much shit, so it was really subdued on the ride back. It was a pretty quiet tour. Everybody kind of stuck to themselves, it wasn't,
I've heard,
and they'd been on the boat for like 9 months.
Yeah, no, yeah, exactly. I've heard theories that it seems like we have more cases of like PTSD and stuff like that, because one of the reasons is that you're in and out of a war zone so quick. You know, like coming out of Afghanistan, you go to fucking either Leatherneck or one of the main bases for like a day or two, and then you fly out to Kurdistan for like a day or two, and then now you're home. You know, within a week, you're like, you could go from like being shot at to being like sitting on your couch at home in under a week. And in World War II and stuff like that, the combat veterans had to come back on ship. And so people think that may have given them time to kind of like decompress amongst themselves before coming back. Do you think that's like a valid kind of, can you see the validity in that?
Yeah, I got a little bit of time to decompress before I made it home to my wife, because basically I took the boat back. We got back to Okinawa April type time frame, maybe March, and I was back in PCS back to California in late May maybe, and so I had a little bit of time to decompress by myself, right? But there was times where people would just crack. Like we had on the well deck of the ship, we had this thing called a mill van for EOD. It's basically like a shipping container sort of thing with a bunch of tools and shit in it. But we had a TV in there, an Xbox, and it was hooked up to the ship's power, so the AC was running. So we kind of had a little hidden place where we can go, right? So I'm in there playing like Ghost Recon of some or something of all things with Jones and Ed, the other two EOD guys that were on the team. And like Jones has like this pellet pistol that we had found in some weapons cache, right? And he's just cocking it, firing it, cocking it and firing it, cocking it and firing it. Oh, actually, no, we were playing. I think we were playing Burnout, the racing game on Xbox. Anyway, and just out of the blue, Ed, who killed himself later, but he's half German, half Japanese, right? Very reserved dude, like very stoic, like if somebody was ever asked me to define stoicism, I would have showed him a picture of Ed. Like, this motherfucker right here is a stoic, right? Like, I don't know if between his German father and his Japanese mother, he was just very straightforward. Well, like out of the blue, Ed snatches this fucking pistol out of Jones's hand and like smashes it against the fucking countertop, and we're all just like. So I just went back to playing the video game. And Jones is like, well, fuck, man, you could have just said to stop. And like Ed just kind of looked at him, and then like Jones just sat back down. So it was like there was people's nerves were frayed, man. And I didn't know how much it had fucked me up until like I got home, man. Like, and it wasn't even shit like that, but I had like banging fucking headaches like constantly, right? Because like nobody cared about explosions back then, and honestly, they still don't. But like, hey, you took a knee next to a wall, and a Humvee got vaporized 10 feet from you. Oh, you're good. Like, so, I would get like weird bouts of disorientation where I'd be like driving and like it's hard to get lost in California, right? You got the Pacific Ocean and you got like the 15 freeway. It's like, you know, and then you got catching features.
Yeah.
You know? So I'd be driving around Miramar and I'd just be like, how the fuck do I get back to like wherever I'm going? And my wife would look at me because, you know, that's not normal. You know, I'm an 03. Like I know how to navigate and shit, you know, like it's, so that like you never really notice, or it doesn't dawn on you that like, hey man, like you're probably fucked up. Like it, you know, you just stiff upper lip it. You know, I smoked a lot of cigarettes when I was in Fallujah. Like, me personally, I just like I was just like, well, you know, these as far as I was concerned, the World War II guys and the Vietnam veterans had it worse. Like even when I left Fallujah, I was like, well, that probably wasn't as bad as Khe Sanh. That probably wasn't as bad as Way City. You know, I was like, I got low self-esteem. So like I just assumed that everybody like had fought in harder shit than I had. And like, I wasn't required to dig people out of a house with a shotgun and a hand grenade, you know? And like, so, you know, I marginalized the shit that I went through.
Well, it becomes normal because you were doing it every day. So it's like, oh, well, and there's so many people around you doing it. It's like, well, I mean, really, almost anyone can do it. Look around. We're all doing this. Yeah, like it's not like I'm not anything special.
Yeah, it was like it didn't dawn on me that it was like completely outrageous to be the guy walking through the fucking out the passageway of the ship, having personally disarmed like 100 IEDs by fucking hand. Like it didn't dawn on
Yeah.
me at the time. I was like, I was still like trying to avoid staff NCOs. I was still trying to like,
You're just
you
you're a
know,
regular dude.
yeah. I'm just like, well, I got put in a position and I did the thing that they told me to do. Like it was it wasn't until later that it kind of like sunk in.
Yeah,
So
man.
that
Were you
yeah.
jumpy? Did you find yourself to be like super jumpy and stuff when you got back?
I so this is something I noticed later on in life that after going through like the TBI clinic, I figured it out. I used to catch myself holding my breath all the time,
Hmm.
and like my ex-wife would like sometimes wake me up because she's like, "You're not breathing." I'm like, "What? I feel fine. Why are you waking me up?" She's like, "You're not breathing," and I would just catch myself holding my breath, and what I realized it was later on is if I had to explain, or I have explained combat to people like this, it's like, okay, like, you work at the bank. Let's just say you work at the bank, right? This is what combat's like. Today, when you go to the bank, teller, whatever it is, your job there, somebody is going to try to knock you the fuck out, right? Sometime during today, unbeknownst to you, the time and place, somebody's going to try to just drop one on your fucking chin. Now, once it happens, you're allowed to defend yourself, right? That part's fine. But until then, like, you don't know when the fuck it's coming. So when you go to the bank, you're gonna go like every time you walk around the corner, you're gonna kind of like, is this it? And then once it
Mm-hmm.
happens, you're like, oh, okay, there it is. Like, let's handle this shit, right? Like, so my body was like in that state like constantly. So I would just catch myself like like sucked up and holding my breath, and I'd be like, oh, okay, well that's like what am I doing? I'm at a red light, like and I don't do it anymore. Probably because in between getting out and getting back into contracting, I took a pretty heavy rest and recuperation cycle with some psychedelic healers. Uh, that's
Hmm.
what I attribute it to. We can cover that one in another one, but like
Cool. Yeah, man.
uh, yeah, like it. And honestly, that could be one of the reasons why I don't have a lot of emotion attached to a lot of these things. Like I used to get pretty violently angry about a lot of shit, right? Like um, and then I just you know sought alternate ways to fucking heal my brain, man. It was I kind of stumbled into it, and I talked about it a little bit on with Brian Buckley on a podcast that Brian does with the company that he works for doing cannabis for veterans out there. And yeah, we just kind of talked about the psychedelic road out of PTSD. Um,
Yeah, they're doing
and
some weird stuff going on. Like people
yeah,
going down to Mexico and I don't know. There's a lot of psychedelics being messed with, and
dude,
it's
I got a guy on the team I work with now who's a former SEAL Team 6 Silver Squadron like recce sniper, and so like a week before we joined the contracting gig that we worked together, he was free falling into Afghanistan to do a hostage rescue, right? Like
hmm,
basically it wasn't a dry hole because he smoked like six dudes in the courtyard, but the hostage wasn't there. I don't know like why the dude didn't fucking show up, whatever. Um, and they ended up like dropping a bomb on all their parachutes and shit. It was very interesting.
hmm.
But uh, he's aware of some dudes that of that caliber that have gone to places like Mexico for things like ibogaine and DMT to like just show them a different way, man. Like it's just
Well, when you get to that level, that he's in. I mean, that's it. That's like I don't know. You're just like a killing machine at that point.
yeah,
It's your program to be as effective as possible. Like I don't want to say like you're a killing machine, but you're kind of are. You're just trained to go
I
into and fucking run the room.
yeah.
Like you're not
Well,
gonna
and that
find better shooters. You know, you're not going to
No.
find people that spend more time on a range, spend more time thinking about how to get out of a vehicle, the best way to get to the target, the quickest. And, you know, like that's just, so it's a different mindset, and you can't live like your whole life, I don't think, like that. I think you have to kind of step back and kind of break off of it.
I equate those dudes to like the NFL of the military.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. Like if you, I stumbled upon, I was listening to a guy, I think on Opie and Anthony back in the day, talking about going from college football to the NFL. And I'm not a sports guy, but for some reason this analogy stuck in my head. I look at your general purpose force, your GPF, you know, call it the conventional forces. I look at that kind of like high school football, and I never played football. So, but this is what the analogy that works for me. Because if you think about it, that's about the age group you're dealing with. You're dealing with 18-year-olds, right? You know, they probably played ball, a lot of them in high school, so they're at that level of sort of physical fitness, you know, they're at that kind of level of maturity, and that's almost what you can kind of expect out of them, right? And then you look at white soft, and those to me are like your collegiate level athletes, and that's kind of the initial age range you're looking at, guys from like 24, maybe up into their early 30s kind of thing.
Do you want to explain to people what you mean when you say white soft?
Okay, so as a colloquialism, this isn't a doctoral term. You know, guys that are not in JSOC are essentially referred to as white soft, right? So, and if you're in JSOC doing weird shit, Joint Special Operations Command, the super secret squirrels, you know, you get referred to as black soft, right? And not even specifically JSOC, because this is like a misunderstanding about what JSOC is. JSOC is a headquarters element, right? Mm-hmm. Like, it's the actual other units that are full of the real people that fucking shoot people. And some of those dudes...
And they all float around each other, too.
Yeah, and some of those dudes end up in JSOC. So, you know, the JSOC commander probably came from SEAL Team 6 at one point. Well, they do. And his deputy might be a Delta guy, you know. And they just sort of like... Or a Ranger. And they just sort of like trade places like that. But then the Black Soft is Delta, SEAL Team 6, essentially that. That's kind of... I mean, once again, these aren't official terms. And then you got guys we call like gray soft, which would have been like the CRIF or the SIF. They're like the in-between point where, you know, the commanders in extremist force or SIF would be something that a local commander could be like, hey, get these guys on the horn. I know the National Mission Force is going to take, that's, you know, Delta and SEAL Team 6. I know those guys have an X window of when they can get here.
Yeah,
right?
these are your regional QRF guys.
Yeah, so the gray soft guys are like ODAs, Green Beret units, who have been specifically tasked. It was called the CRIF in Iraq, with being that in between. Like until the national guys get here, these guys will get it. But then white soft guys are just doing like what I did. You just run around doing white soft shit. That's your question?
Yeah, I just wanted to make sure,
okay.
like. I know there's civilians that listen to this that don't catch everything that we're talking about sometimes, so I try to clear it up.
So white soft is basically your everyday SEALs, you know, SEAL Team 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, or not 6, you know, 7, whatever. MARSOC in its entirety. The majority of the ODAs, the Green Berets, the Special Operations groups, or Special Forces groups, you know, a smattering of your Air Force dudes. And then you have the units that everybody knows about, but nobody knows about.
Yeah.
You know, it's like
the stuff that's like not real, but
yeah.
Even though officials like mention it on the news and shit sometimes, like you hear people talk about it, like, okay, dude.
Well, this is the way to tell the difference. They'll say SEAL Team 6 did it when SEAL Team 6 did it, but if Delta did it, they'll say Special Operations Forces. So like if some dude gets snatched in like 27 seconds flat out of fucking Libya, but they accidentally got caught on CCTV when they did it, you know, kind of thing like that. Like
I've seen that video, I think.
Yeah. And it's funny in like one of Matt Best's videos, he's kind of like showing you how different special ops guys train, you know, and it's like you know, the Ranger dudes are carrying 2 big old fucking kettlebells between their legs because he's a Ranger, and they're like, look, these guys got big balls, so they got to carry these 2 kettlebells between their legs to practice carrying these balls, you know. And then when it comes across, you know, MARSOC, it's like a guy with a little stuffed animal, and he's like, oh, and then he like throws it down and starts smashing it with a fucking sledgehammer, you know, because we're all supposed to be psychopaths or something. And then for Delta, like nobody's in the fucking screen, right? And then you just see like a kettlebell drop out of the sky, and like you never see him, kind of shit. And like the SEAL Team 6 guys, like they're doing like sit-ups, and like one of them's like shaking a fucking shake weight in the other guy's face, and they're all like getting ready to like shave their legs and write books and shit. But it's all professional, like rivalry, you know. It is what it is. Like,
well, there's been some hate on like SEAL Team 6 and stuff lately, and like I think they got tied in with some of the whole Eddie Gallagher thing, which honestly I can't really speak to. I think they got tied in with some of the stuff that came out about the Australian SAS guys that were saying how they were just killing dudes. Like some of them were just killing dudes, I guess.
Yeah.
I don't know. There's some pushback from different spots. Hey, I'm all about accountability, you know. Like I think if you can't just be out murking people for nothing. You know, be good at killing bad guys, and outside of that, that's just fucked up.
Well, yeah, because then at a certain point, you know, we have to release these people back into civilian society, and like if well,
I mean, more than that, I mean, how better are we if we're just letting dudes go and fucking kill families or whatever? That's why it's so outrageous that there's nothing happening about that last strike in Afghanistan where 10 people, including 7 children, got killed. You know, that's just like, what? You know, like if a JTAC had done, I don't know. I mean, obviously a JTAC was involved with that, but the target, I don't know, man. It's just fucked up. So anyways.
Did Muscle Man tell the story about how he had to go talk to like the commanding general of Afghanistan in Leatherneck after he did that close fire mission in Afghanistan?
Who, Muscleman? You know Muscleman?
Yeah. Yeah, from being a MARSOC, yeah.
Oh, I didn't know you knew him. You know, funny story. I was actually watching his podcast one of his podcasts that I did with him today. I was like, man, I need to cut up a bunch of these clips and put them on. I don't think he did talk about having to speak to any kind of general or anything like that.
So
he didn't really talk about too many of his strikes, to be honest, in Afghanistan. He talked about some of the missions. He did talk about a couple things, but he didn't go into a lot of detail because I think his second time was when he did the most stuff. I think he was with the commando team. And he was like, that was when we're basically just doing direct action raids. So
I'm almost 100% positive this is him because my brain gets weird after like all this shit. But like
Tony's good people, yeah.
So we were in Afghanistan 2012 and 13, or that was my last time in Afghanistan. And I was at Calero, which is the SOF headquarters in Bastion for the U.S. And I was just passing through there because I normally lived up in Herat, but as the SOTF EOD officer, I had to like, kind of like circle around. And so I'm like just standing by the smoking pit, smoking cigarettes with him, just shooting the shit. And him and my other buddy who just passed away, this MARSOC EOD guy named Rick Ferguson, were there. Because kind of what went down was this, if I remember correctly, a dude named Zach George, a CSO, had got shot, right? They're in a tick in some shithole in Afghanistan, right? Mm-hmm. And it's a bad one. Like they're fucking surrounded. They're getting maneuvered on. They're getting down to like their last mags. I mean, Zach George is like bleeding out. If I hope one of these guys can correct the story if I fuck it up. But so one of the ways that they break this contact is they call in danger close 105 fire missions, like basically on themselves, right? Like straight up Vietnam style shit. Like, hey, the compound wall's here. We need this fire mission on the other side of the fucking wall, kind of thing. Well, for some reason,
from the AC-130s or from like 105s, like Army 105s.
I think it was British. It might have been because we've called in British 105s before.
Yeah, okay. I didn't know if you meant. I just want to make sure it wasn't the gun shit.
No, I think these were on the ground.
Okay.
So basically, he had to leave his team and come back and like talk to like the fucking US 4A or whoever the Marine general was on Leatherneck and kind of explain to him how the hell this shit went down, right? So basically, because I don't know if there was civcast in that area when that went down or not, but kind of what I'm getting to is the level of accountability that guys like you and I got held to, and Aaron and I have talked about this on our show, is so fucking above and beyond what happened to the people that murdered that family. It's not even fucking funny. And that's one of those things where sometimes I click off safe on social media and I start firing at the fucking military because, hey, look, hey, the true story is, I got 23 straight years of service to the fucking DOD. And if you put my resume up in combat or you give it like the Pepsi challenge, I feel like an OnlyFans fucking provider. Like my OnlyFans combat is like in the top 3% of providers. Like I got to talk to my SEAL Team 6 buddy to find dudes that have done hairier shit than I have. Or like it.
Yeah,
And
I know what you're saying.
Like I'm a very self-depreciating dude, man. Like I said, I got low self-esteem. I'm like, I don't think I've fucking done anything. And then I talk to buddies, and they're like, "What, dude? You're out of your fucking mind."
It's mind blowing that nobody in that chain of command even got held accountable. Like fired, relieved. Like where did the intel come from? I mean, this dude was literally a fucking aid worker.
Right, which means the Department of State must have known he was there.
And they were saying when they were trying to say that his house was a possible like terrorist stash house or some shit. And it's like, dude, this dude was literally an aid worker that worked with the organization that was tied to the U.S. And so to me, it's like, where was the intelligence failure there? So why is there no intelligence people being held responsible? Maybe there were. Maybe there's some behind the scenes like letter of reprimand or whatever bullshit. But that's fucked up, man. That's so fucked up that 10 people got killed on the last strikeout.
Yeah.
And nobody from the Department of Defense was publicly fired or like relieved from their command. I don't know. It's just the way everything went down was pretty fucked up. And I think everyone that's honest, and especially the veterans, look at it and are like, it could have been done way better. I don't know. It's frustrating.
Well, that's kind of what I was getting to is like, if I don't have the experience and the authority, because, guys will tell you, we just don't know. That's basically the feeling at the higher levels of the fucking, because it is what it is. I work on a high level fucking staff. So, I mean, the fucking, whatever, I hope I get fired. The fucking general's office is a stone's throw from my office, right? Like I work in the fucking G shops.
I was going to ask if you ever worry about like losing a clearance or getting fired from stuff you talk about on your own podcast, because they don't like being criticized. Not everyone likes being criticized.
We used to, and honestly, that's probably why our show hasn't gotten or is still fairly small. Like on YouTube, it's blown up on RockFam, but like because we weren't really advertising, right? Occasionally, we would catch a young CSO who'd be like, "Hey man, caught your show and like it," and be like, "Oh hey, cool man, thanks." We don't really tell people a lot that we do it, But now, like my contemporaries are battalion commanders. My fucking my second team leader in MARSOC is now the 2nd Raider Battalion commander.
Yeah,
and I could tell you for a fact some fucking stories that dude would probably not want told, right? Like,
God, don't throw him under the bus.
Yeah, so but here's what it is. Like I'm to the point where I'm like, look, dudes, like we all know each other's fucking dirt, man. Like so when I'm asking the same question you're asking, like where the fuck? Hey, like I'm not trying to be like that weird lieutenant colonel dude who hey,
Schiller.
what? Yeah, look, dude. Whether I agree with you or not, and I do, like you had to have been like, I disagree with your tactics, like, and sure. Not even. Yeah. And not even from the point where you shouldn't have done what you should have done. It's just you should have fucking lawyered up first. Like I think he's correct in what he's saying, which is we need radical accountability and we need it yesterday. Like, because I'm to the point now where like I'm asking folks, and Aaron and I kind of talked about this on the last show. I'm like you mean to tell me that the generals that couldn't defeat the fucking Taliban are the ones that are telling us that they know how the show is going to go against the Russians and the Chinese? Yeah. I'm like, hey man, if
your track record's not great right now,
it's
hard to put my faith in you when your track record is looking pretty rough.
I'm like, bro, we haven't won a fucking war since 91 or some shit. Like, yeah, that
they did just relieve an entire like command of that sub that wrecked, in like an underwater mountain or whatever. You know what I'm talking about?
I wasn't aware of that one.
So like 2 weeks ago, there was like a nuclear sub that was like, oh, all of a sudden it's coming back to home port, like limping back, and they said it struck an underground feature, and there was like a shit ton of damage. Like sailors were like 15 sailors were injured or some shit like that.
Yeah.
And they said the other day, a couple days ago, that they're relieving the entire officer like command structure of that submarine because of that happening. And it's like, dude, I mean, why can't that happen with this other shit too? You know what I'm saying? Like, I don't know.
And I'm not even saying, because if dudes were like, well, look, if we throw these motherfuckers in jail, which whatever it is, well, there should at least be a fucking investigation.
Who
right?
would go to? I mean, how could you say, unless someone was malicious? I mean, how are you going to put anyone in jail because the pilot?
Yeah.
If a pilot pulled the trigger on it, he's doing what he was told because he was told the target's good. If the JTAC is the one given the clearance, he was told by the intel guy that this is a good target, and that by the targeting people that this meets the CDE requirements, the what is that, collateral damage estimate requirements and stuff like that to do that strike. I think they conducted it in that position because it was within a walled compound. That was why they did it there. And so that's why I say, who's the intel? Like, who's the people behind this intel? Why was our intel that bad? It was so bad. It was almost like someone took a fucking, like a little piece of paper out of a thing, and it was like, oh, I got to make something out of this, phrase or whatever. Or what are those ad libs back in the day where you just fill in the words? They're like, oh, terrorist cell in building, like this.
Yeah. I don't know. So removing jail from the equation, right? Because that could turn into a super slippery slope real quick, where we could all be fucking sort of on the hook.
Anybody that's ever been in charge of any kind of strike.
Or you could be like, hey, everybody, there were no weapons of mass destruction in Iraq. So what were you doing there again? Like, so you want to talk about, me blowing up 6 buildings in one day for people that had no weapons of mass destruction? Like, but it's like, why can't we just relieve them? Like, hey, General.
That's what I'm saying.
Like, you're going to get your retirement. You're going to get, 100% because you've gone over 30, but we're also going to open up some room for promotion because you clearly didn't. Like, how the fuck did, and maybe this will bleed into the next one, but like how, like, you got 3 tours in Afghanistan, right?
2, yeah.
2, like, I got 3. So between the two of us, we could discuss across 5 deployments how across multiple years, multiple deployments, multiple AOs, we somehow weren't able to come up with a different strategy that would move the football down the fucking field. Like, it's to the point where it's like, and it dawned on me when you were talking to Fred Galvin that he discussed Rumsfeld being Secretary of Defense. It just blew my mind. Or he was in some position of authority in Vietnam. Yeah. And then you fast forward in Vietnam, once again, you have a long drawn out battle where there's no real way to kind of get out of it. No way. We know where Hanoi is. I don't know why we couldn't have made Hanoi flat. And it's just a long drawn out thing. And then you kind of juxtapose that over Afghanistan. You're like, yeah. And these generals just kind of go like, oh, look, I was the SIFSOC A commander. Now I'm the US 4A commander. And you're like,
well, they're all checking boxes to get to that next command.
Yeah, like Lloyd Austin was in charge of Afghanistan for a hot minute, and then the episode that we did on Afghanistan, I have a ticker running on the bottom that I took off the SIGAR's website, which is like SIGARs.gov or some shit. It's the Special Inspector Generals for the Afghan Reconstruction page, where it just talks about waste, fraud, and abuse.
So much waste
for fucking days, right? Like
so much waste, billions.
So when this guy was a US 4A commander, like, or a CENTCOM commander or whatever he was, like, I can go tomorrow at work, I can go log into the fucking secret internet, the SIPR net, and I can go onto a site called fucking HOTR, right? I don't know what the fuck HOTR stands for, but it's the intelligence basically website. So I can search for intelligence reports, right? For the folks that don't know, intelligence reporting is serialized reporting, right? Like if you and I go on a mission, it kind of shows it in that movie Navy SEALs, the old school 80s movie Navy SEALs. They go do the hostage rescue in the very beginning of the show, and then they come back on the ship, and there's a couple of dudes, Navy lieutenants in khakis, debriefing them. Like that's real shit. Like you go to a thing.
You always debrief after.
Yeah, you come back and intel, if they're not with you, debriefs you, and they write it into a draft intelligence information report, right? A DIR, D-I-I-R. And then that thing goes through a scrubbing and review process by higher echelons that say processing, exploitation, dissemination, right? A PED loop or whatever. And they say, yes, this meets the National Human Collection Directive. So the Office of the Director of National Intelligence, and this is what always cracks me up. I can just rattle this shit off the top of my head. And I talked to some schmuck in the fucking grocery store who's like, oh, well, I guess we just couldn't figure out how shit works. So like, I'm telling you how it works. So there are National Human Collection Directives that say this is important in this country, right? So I guess what I'm getting at is like, back to what you're saying, there should be a chain of custody. When we're killing people with airstrikes, it typically requires 2 derogatory information reports into IARs that say this guy's a terrorist, right? Not just one, like multiple. You're a journalist, multiple sources. I heard you say it. We were talking to Fred Galvin. Like, you don't just take one dude's word. Like, if I got this one IAR that says he's a terrorist, I need another one, right? Within 90 days, like corroborating each other that says, okay, this has been through the process. These are serialized reports. They're in hot R forever. And now we can strike this motherfucker. So there should be a chain of custody. And in case you haven't been on the talk, when a strike bridge is open, Aaron and I talked about this too. Like the CO is standing there, right, watching Reaper porn, and standing next to him.
Everybody comes in. Everybody fills up the room when there's a strike about to happen. Yeah.
So standing next to him is his lawyer. The JAG is right there, and he's like, "Yes, sir. We've had positive ID for the last, 3 hours on this guy. Like you said, he's in a low collateral damage estimate. There's usually an arrow or a fires officer on the talk floor. Of course there is, and on the right side, big screen up there, he's got like a bubble that he's with the CDE estimate for that particular ordnance round. He's like, yes, sir. I got the bubble up. You can see it right there. That's an X meter bubble. We're good to go. There's no hospitals, mosques, fucking children, whatever. Like, so you and I know that there were 15 to 20, like, who knows, steps.
It's a process. Yeah.
So when people are like, oh, you guys are warmongers, I'm like, bro, at any given time when I'm overseas, I could probably kill everybody in my near vicinity, right? But the fact is, like, we are so restrained, right? Like my MSOT, when we're in Afghanistan, if we decided to click off safe, we could wipe out the fucking west side of Afghanistan until we run out of ammunition. Like, nobody's going to stop us.
Yeah, if you really wanted to. Yeah, it's I've talked about it multiple times on the podcast, though, about how there must be units, or there must be, when I hear that there's like, oh, all these people were killed, this family was killed, most of the time I'm like, dude, that's got to be like national level targeting, because down here at the tactical level, the battalions and stuff like that, it happens, but very, very rarely does it ever happen. Right. I only know one guy of all my friends that I know that are JTACs that did a strike and it for sure killed civilians. I only know one guy. And there was an investigation and all this shit and everything. And, they were being attacked from that compound and stuff like that. So it's, when people were talking about like how there's predators just killing all kinds of people, I'm like, I just don't buy it, man, because I remember seeing guys that were like, this is an HVT, a high value target, or watching them with like a Reaper or something like that. And you have to maintain surveillance on them. Like, they can't leave line of sight at all. And if you do, then our intel dudes have to go through their ways of verifying that person is who we think it is. And I remember one time a guy literally walked under a tarp, for like not even a half a second maybe. And you could tell his direction of travel. And they're like, well, he's out of line of sight. Now we have to start over with the intel dudes to verify that is the same guy. And we're like, Jesus Christ, man. And we're talking like, to strike that guy took, I want to say we tracked him for like 6 hours. You know what I'm saying? Just following him and verifying and then making sure he was away from everything and everyone. And so it's like, for me, when I hear people say that, they make it sound like we're just shooting shit randomly. I'm like, that wasn't my experience. You know, everybody's experience is different, but it wasn't my experience. I gave the story at the beginning about that helicopter strafing that friendly compound, that civilian compound. You know, stuff like that happens, unfortunately, but you're talking out of my entire deployment, you know, one incident like that maybe two. I think a Harrier did something similar at some point, but no friendlies killed or no civilians killed. We had one civilian that was killed during our deployment. A designated marksman shot him because he was farming and they thought he was digging in the road, and he was supposed to have a lantern. I guess the rules at the time were you can farm at night, it's no big deal, but you got to have a lantern so we know you're not out there, you know, and placing IEDs and shit. And he was literally farming like in a ditch next to the road, or he was like working, and they thought he was putting in an IED, and I guess a DM shot that guy and killed him. And his family, you know, brought his body over and they paid him like a couple $1,000 or something like that.
Yeah.
Which they were fine with that, which is so weird. But
exactly.
But it's what I'm getting at is like you're saying, it's just such a rare kind of thing in my experience, you know. When I think of when you hear about these wedding parties that get struck and shit like that, I'm like, that's national level stuff. There must have been some dude who was like a super valuable target. But even then, I'm like, how valuable was the guy where you're going to take out 20 people that you can't confirm who they are? And like, how many enemy, like, I don't know, man. It's very frustrating. Yeah, so, we could talk about that shit for hours.
Right.
Oh, dude. Well, this is a marathon when I usually stop them at 3 hours, but every once in a while, or 2 hours, but every once in a while I go a little long, and this is a good conversation. We kind of went all over the place, you know. We'll have you come back on and go over your career and stuff. You want to go ahead and give out your information for people to look up your guys' podcast and stuff?
Yeah, so if you want to hear me and Aaron talk about strange things, you can go to Stranger by the Hour podcast on YouTube, or just Stranger by the Hour on YouTube. I'm not sure if there's a podcast on there. Stranger_pod at Instagram, and Stranger by the Hour on Rockfin. We're trying to get people to migrate away from YouTube over to Rockfin, just is what it is. And Stranger by the Hour on mine. So pretty much Stranger by the Hour. Anywhere you look, you can find us.
Cool, man. Thanks again for coming on, and everybody can check out my Instagrams at Former Action Guys, at Kramer Graphics. I think right before we started, I was at like 995 subscribers on YouTube.
Hell yeah!
So if you haven't, please subscribe on YouTube. Help bump me up over 1,000. That'd be super cool. Check out the website jkramergraphics.com, and have a good night. Oh, and happy birthday!
All right,
again,
cool,
bro.
everybody. Yeah, happy birthday, Marines.
Rah.